Good afternoon. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, city council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligentsia prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. Arnuzzi, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you are present when your name is called? Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Cindy Bass. Councilmember Alan Dom.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr.
Mr. Chairman, colleagues, Philadelphia, I am present.
Councilmember David O.
I'm present. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Maria Canona Sanchez.
Good afternoon. I'm present.
Councilmember Mark Squilla. And Chair Green.
And I am present. Thank you, Mr. Arnuzzi. Quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Finance regarding bill numbers 220292, 220293, 220506, 220508, 220509, 220510, 220511, and 220529. Mr. Arnuzzi, will you please read the title of the bills?
Bill number 220292, an ordinance authorizing an increase in the non-electoral indebtedness of the city within Pennsylvania constitutional limit, authorizing the bond committee to sell bonds at public or private negotiated sale, to provide funds toward various capital municipal purposes, providing for appropriations to the sinking fund commission for the payment of such bonds, and authorizing agreements to provide credit or payment or liquidity sources for the bonds in connection with issuance of the bonds and certain other actions. Bill number 220293, an ordinance amending bill number 190412, entitled an ordinance approving city participation in the Commonwealth's Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, all under certain terms and conditions, to modify the CPACE program in conformity with Commonwealth legislation, and to make other conforming changes, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 220506, an ordinance authorizing and approving the execution and delivery of a service agreement between the City of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Energy Authority relating to the financing of the construction, equipping, and installation of an energy-efficient city street lighting system and related improvements, approving the issuance of such authority bonds, notes, or other evidences of indebtedness in one or more series of to finance or refinance such project, and authorizing and approving the obligation of the city to pay in full, when due, the service fee and other amounts payable under the service agreement, etc. Bill number 220508, an ordinance approving a substantial amendment to the annual action plan 2021 to 2022 to add $42,007,561 in Home American Rescue Plan funding under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 220509, an ordinance authorizing the Director of Planning and Development on behalf of the city to file application with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for Community Development Block Grant, to file application to participate in the Home Improvement Partnership Program and the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, etc. Bill number 220510, an ordinance authorizing the city treasurer on behalf of the city to enter into an amendment agreement with Citizens Bank of Pennsylvania for provision of payroll banking services to the city under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 220511, an ordinance approving the fiscal year 2023 capital budget providing for expenditures for the capital purposes of Philadelphia Gas Works, including the supplying of funds in connection therewith, subject to certain constraints and conditions, and acknowledging receipt of the revised forecast of capital budgets for fiscal years 2024 through 2028. Bill number 220529, an ordinance authorizing the Fire Commissioner and the Revenue Commissioner on behalf of the city to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Human Services to enable the city to maintain and provide access to emergency medical services under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. I'd like to note for the record that we're also joined by Councilmember Cindy Bass. Thank you for being here, Councilmember. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have here for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded, and because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have or witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that members of council will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow council members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used by members of council and for this purpose. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please call the first panel of witnesses we have this afternoon regarding bill number 220922?
Tavari Brown, Assistant to the Director of Finance for the City of Philadelphia.
Ms. Brown, good to see you. Please just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
My name is Tavari Brown. I'm the Deputy Budget Director for Capital. Good afternoon, Chairperson Green and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Tavari Brown, Deputy Budget Director for Capital, and I'm here today to testify in support of Bill number 220292, which was introduced on March 31st, 2022. The purpose of this bill is to obtain approval from City Council to authorize an increase in non-electoral indebtedness for the city within the Pennsylvania constitutional limit. The loan question requests an increase in indebtedness in the amount not to exceed $189 million to fund the city's fiscal year 2023 capital budget. As of March 24th, 2022, the city's legal debt limit was $14.16 billion, and the amount of indebtedness applicable to that limit was $2.29 billion. As a result, the city has a debt margin of about $11.75 billion. The fiscal year 23 capital budget for new general obligation bonds is approximately $180.8 million. This proposed loan authorization ordinance includes the proposed new general obligation, or GO, loan amount with an additional 4% for cost of issuance. This brings the loan authorization amount to approximately $189 million. The loan authorization, if approved, would finance capital projects classified for the following purposes and in the following aggregate amounts. Transit, $5,707,000. Streets and sanitation, $41,713,000. Municipal buildings, $72,654,000. Parks, recreation, and museums, $48,017,000. And economic and community development, $20,909,000, for a total of $189 million. I respectfully request that you report Bill number 220292 out of committee with a favorable recommendation, and I further request that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at the next session of council. This concludes my testimony, and I will be happy to answer any questions council might have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'd like to also note for the record that we've also been joined by Councilmember Helen Ginn. Mr. Brown, just have a few questions regarding this bill. as we are providing financing for these various capital projects within the city of Philadelphia, what type of providers are we currently using in reference to providers of color, in particular FAs or financial advisors, legal counsel, investment banks that we're using as part of these offerings?
So I would like to, and I see Jackie's already come up. I would like to hand it over to the Office of Treasury. Jackie?
Okay, Ms. Dunn, thank you for being here. Please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Sure, Jackie Dunn, City Treasurer, and to answer your question, Chair Green, we won't be doing the borrowing for this loan authorization until fiscal year 26. But in general, to your point about our dedication and consistent efforts to ensure participation across the financing team, we make sure that we have diverse participation from bond and disclosure councils. So we use the co-counsel model, as I know you're well familiar with, where they're dividing the work, dividing the legal document drafting, and helping us to bring us to market for the transactions and providing legal opinions. We use co-financial advisors so that we have representation there as well. And then we also typically use printers and verification agents for the bond transactions that are also usually M or WBEs. We're very fortunate to have a strong market in that area to be able to provide us services for all the transactions, whether geo-specific or for airport water and other credits.
And I know based on what you've previously testified during budget hearings, there's not a lot of GO dollars in this fiscal year, and this is for future fiscal years. But as part of your process, bringing in diverse professionals, for the record, I know you issue RFPs and do rotations for the various professionals. Can you just state for the record the current status of the RFPs and rotations you're using for those professionals?
Sure. For the financial advisors for the city's general obligation credit, we have 3. We use PFM, a local firm, Acacia, a women-owned firm, and Phoenix Capital, a minority-owned firm. So we tend to rotate across those 3 for general obligation and for service agreement transactions.
And real quick, if you could also state when the RFP will be coming up for those rotations for those various professionals.
Sure. We just completed the RFP process for financial advisors for the GO credit this spring, I believe. So that is the start of a 4-year engagement for those 3 providers. For Bond and Disclosure Council, we just completed an RFP for the general obligation credit and for the airport. And for the GO providers, we use, again, we have several for GO because it's such a frequent credit, but we use Ahmad Zafries, Ballard Spahr, Cozen O'Connor, and Eckerd Siemens and Turner Law. Turner and Ahmad Zafries are minority-owned firms. Ballard Spahr, we're fortunate that our senior partner is a African-American female, and then Cozen O'Connor.
Is that Valerie Allen?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
And then our disclosure councils are Hawkins, Delafield and Wood, and Ann Leibowitz, a woman-owned firm.
And then also, I think the last, I'm not going to focus on the printers or verification agents, but for investment banks.
For investment banks, I believe it was about a year ago, we established the pool for investment bank firms. There are 15. We have 3 that are qualified as senior underwriters, Ramirez, Loop, and Siebert, who are eligible to not only participate on the deal, but also to lead the deal. Ramirez and Siebert have both recently led our last water and the NPI transaction for us. And when we look long-term at spending across all the transactions, those 3 firms are in the top 10 of underwriters utilized by dollar designations.
Okay. And then, Mr. Brown, you talked about the authorization to issue capital offerings, and can you give a perspective? I think you said we're at the debt limit. What was the amount again, if you could state that for the record?
So the debt limit for the city is approximately 11.75 billion. Or the debt margin, I guess. There's a higher debt limit, 14.16, but the debt limit that we're working within is 11.75 billion.
And then, including this proposal, what would be our debt amount?
Within this, this is an additional $189 million on that. So that will be 11 point, I'm doing the math in my head, I'm sorry, 11.69 million dollars. So, $1 billion, but keep in mind that's the overall debt limit. That's based off of certain calculation associated with the real estate assessment. So it's very unlikely that we would go up to that 11 billion, obviously, because we have to also be able to pay for that on the operating side from the debt service.
And last question, and I'll then acknowledge Councilmember Down for a question. Based on the recent proposal for assessments, how does that factor into that debt limit?
So it kept us fairly consistent with the previous ones. Give me 1 second. Let me just look at it. But as far as that overall amount, it didn't really change too much from the prior fiscal year's debt limit. Let me just look at something real quick. And then, that's the benefit of being remote.
We can multitask.
Sure can. So, just for a little context, so the real estate assessment, the prior one came in at 128.77 billion, and then this year came in at 128.79 billion. So the difference in our debt capacity, which we're looking at, let's say a percentage of that, 13.5% is where you see that 11 billion that I'm talking about, didn't really change much from the prior year to this year.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Councilmember Dom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I have a couple quick questions for you. Just a general question on the interest rates. I was just curious if we've seen in the mortgage market interest rates basically double in the last 3 months. And the borrowing for our capital, what kind of increase have we seen in that arena? So can anyone maybe comment on that?
So I would like to bring up the Treasurer's Office once again. Great partners.
Sure. Good afternoon, Jackie Dunn again, City Treasurer. We've certainly seen a very significant increase in interest rates. We're fortunate that we don't need to go back to the market for some time. So I think that our hope is that some of the volatility will settle when the Fed goes through their tightening cycle. But we are watching, and it looks like a lot of issuers, Councilman Dom, are really only going to market if they absolutely need to at this time. A lot of refundings no longer work as well, and so I do think there's a little bit of a dance of wait and see. But for this transaction, it's certainly very far down the pike. We'll be going to market about this time next summer for previous GO loan authorizations, and so I think our hope is that we'll have a better sense, and there'll be much less volatility, and we'll know what to expect heading into pricing, and then also to try through demand to be able to peel away some basis points and get an even better deal for the city based on where the market is for issuers and for our credit.
Right, but have you seen like a doubling of?
One quick point of information. If I remember correctly, Treasurer Dunn, your office as well as Finance Department has been very aggressive in refundings over the past couple of years. And if I remember from the earlier budget hearing, you stated we probably would not do a lot of new money because of the issues that Councilman Dom has raised that were on the horizon.
So yes, we did take advantage of a number of refunding opportunities over the last 18 months prior to the Fed taking their first increase in interest rates. And so we were fortunate to be able to refund some of those longer maturities at very competitive very low historically real rates. You know, when you look at the long term, while rates are quickly rising, we are still, you know, historically generally in not a terrible time to issue debt, especially if you need it for capital purposes. Increasing rates certainly raise the cost of borrowing and make it more expensive, you know, decrease your purchasing power, make it more expensive to buy what you need, or that you have to, you have less resources to make the purchases that you need. And so I really think because we don't have to come to market for another year for GO, we are in a good place to be able to ride some of this out. And then I think we do the best transaction we can do at that time. But, you know, it's hard for any of us to say where we'll be this time a year from now.
I guess the question I have is, you know, I've been around a while, so I've seen rates go from the low of 2.5% for mortgages. I've seen them at 21%. I guess my point is, even though they may have gone up a lot or doubled, as you say, they're still at the bottom. And I just wonder if there's any way of us buying any kind of protection on an interest rate cap. So even if we pay a little money on a premium, if inflation continues the way we're seeing it, we're at least protected.
So we do explore that we get proposals very often from banks about locking into a rate, like through a forward transaction for refunding and things like that. But I think in the past that didn't make sense, just given that we were able to do the transaction and lock in really great rates through negotiated pricing. I think we'll continue to certainly, as you said, evaluate those as they come across to see if that makes sense for the city. But you're right, we were able to get like 2% for 20-year debt, and now it's up at 3%. I mean, in a very short period of time, so it feels dramatic, but I think we try and take a long-term view and just make sure we're also doing as much as we can with what the market is giving us at that time.
3 is still cheap.
Point of
Yes.
information. Point of information.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Remember, Dom, they're not going to get much lower, are they? So we might as well gamble on them going up, if I understand.
That's why I'm asking if we could lock in or have an option to lock in and pay a premium as an insurance hedge. I'm not sure it's available. I'm just putting it out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Thank
So
you.
we will sometimes see those offers for refundings based on the legal structure of the debt. We don't have any of those at this time, just to answer the question directly. We also want to make sure we're not going, we can't borrow money and sit on it. You know, we borrow tax exempt, you have to spend it within a certain time period. And so we really do the best we can to go to the market for what we need and when we're ready to spend it and get the best rates at that time. And try and take that long-term perspective. You know, as I said, in whatever environment you're in, whether rates are declining, increasing, holding steady at rock bottom levels, we really just try and do the best we can with what we're given, because no one can really predict, you know, what's coming down the pike.
And I just also, Mr. Chair, I'd like to put on the record that I think it's necessary we make good in our funding this budget season on the commitment to the Art Museum to fund their capital program. And I want us to continue to advocate for living up to the agreements we made to them in this fiscal year 23 capital budget. And similarly, our Philadelphia Zoo, which is used by so many of our local residents and attracts people from all over. Both of those are huge attractions for tourism and bring people back into the city. Just want to make sure that we're funding them and living up to our commitments. Just want to put that on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Totally agree on both of those points. Are there any other questions for these witnesses on this bill? Seeing none in the chat feature. Thank you all for being here and providing testimony. I know Ms. Dunn will see you a little bit later. With that, we'll move on to the next bill. Mr. Iannuzzi, if you can call the panel witnesses for the next bill as we proceed with the hearing.
Julia Hinckley, Policy Director for the City of Philadelphia.
Good afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hinckley. If you just please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chair Green and members of the Finance Committee. I'm Julia Hinckley. I'm the Policy Director and Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Kenny. Thank you for allowing me to testify on Bill number 220529, which authorizes the Fire Commissioner and the Director of Finance on behalf of the city to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, PADHS, to enable the city to maintain and provide access to emergency medical services or EMS services. This agreement is similar to several other agreements that the city has with PADHS, which support additional funding for the provision of healthcare services to our residents. This agreement will allow the city and the state to generate federal Medicaid matching funds and bring additional revenue to the city. As you know, the Medicaid program is a program that provides health insurance to people with low or no income. Under this agreement, beginning in January 2023, the city will be paid a higher rate for the EMS services it provides to city residents who are enrolled in the Medicaid program. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify on this important topic, and I am here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Hinckley, for your testimony. And it's my understanding that we used this agreement a few years ago to support higher Medicaid payments for federally qualified health centers. And give me some more perspective in reference to how this has been used in the past. When we used it in 2019, the fact having the ability to have the intergovernmental agreement to get a higher Medicaid rate payment definitely is important. But how effective was this when we used this last in 2019?
Yeah, so this is similar to an agreement that we have that supports services and a higher rate visit payments at the health centers. I don't have the data in front of me. I'm not sure if anyone in finance can, but we can definitely get it for you. I have a figure in my head, but I don't want to misquote around how much additional revenue we're able to get in the health centers through this mechanism. But this is a similar mechanism that we would do to increase the rates for each ambulance trip, basically. It'll allow a significant increase in the per trip rate for ambulance trips.
Yeah. And it's my understanding that in order to take advantage of the opportunity with the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, we need to have this local legislation which provides an intergovernmental agreement to enable us to take advantage of this opportunity.
That's right. That's right. You'll get, if you give us permission, this allows us to enter into a 2-year agreement with the Commonwealth so that we can do this transaction over the next 2 years.
Okay. And then what happens after the 2 years? Are we able to then try and do this again
Yes.
for another 2 years? And why is the contract only allowed for a 2-year time period?
So it does have options to renew. The state has to, each year, the state will have to seek permission from the feds. So that's why, and they wanted to start with a 2-year agreement. I think that's how we've started with a couple of these agreements with a relatively short term, but with an option to renew. And then they do have to take some steps on their part, including seeking federal approval initially, and then for subsequent extensions.
So similar to like our consolidated plan, which we do through our process and get that prepared prior to new federal fiscal year starting October 1. Is that also something similar that the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services has to get approval from the federal government? And so this gives us the opportunity to do that at least over 2 years, and then we have an option to renew.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions from members of council for Ms. Hinckley? I see Councilmember Dime has a question.
Yeah, I just want to try to understand this. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to try to understand. This is in order for us to get reimbursed for the services we're providing. Just want to make sure I'm clear.
It's our payment rate for ambulance trips when for people who are Medicaid enrolled. So it will allow the state to raise our per trip rate that fire gets paid for their EMS trips. And the agreement, though, we are entering into agreement to provide the non-federal share that then allows the state to draw down federal share. So we are agreeing to transfer money to them, which then supports their Medicaid payments to us, and then they're able to draw down federal dollars so basically allow significant increases in the per trip rate.
Is there a gap right now in what the services we provide, the services reimbursed, and will this cover that gap?
I believe, I'm not sure if Martin McCall from Fire is on, and I know Finance is on, but we do provide a significant general fund subsidy to Fire for the gap between operating expenses and the revenue that they get from Medicaid, Medicare, and commercial insurance. I believe this will not cover the entire gap, but it will significantly increase the rate for those beneficiaries who are enrolled in Medicaid, which is the largest group of insured folks that EMS transports in Philly.
Do you have any idea what the numbers are of the gap now? And if this goes through, what that gap might be?
I can't speak to I don't know if finance folks could speak to the current level of general fund subsidy for Fire.
Rob Dubo, Finance Director. So most of our fire costs are not reimbursed. This reimbursement is just related to EMS costs, and it doesn't cover all those. Actually, Cole has gotten in, he may have more specific, but this we do not cover all of our EMS costs, and this will help cover some of those costs.
How much are those costs, Rob, roughly? What will this cover, and what will be that delta that still won't be covered?
I have to get back to you on what that delta would be, but we can at least figure out what the total cost is now.
Is there
And
any
I
other?
can say that the estimates, which are estimates still, but the estimates that are supporting us wanting to do this, that the state believes that we will receive somewhere in the neighborhood of about $7 million a year in increased revenue. Again, it's an estimate. There's a lot of pieces that have to happen, but that's their general rough projection right now for how much more revenue this will yield.
I'm in favor of all of this, including getting more. Just want to put that on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Dom. Any additional questions for Mr. DeBow or Ms. Hinckley on this topic? Councilmember.
Thank you for that part.
Well,
Just I'm very.
we'll have
pleased.
questions for you later, early next week.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very pleased, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm very pleased with Mr. DeBoe's longevity in understanding the budget intricacies and how to project well in the third quarter.
And Councilmember Jones, does that conclude your comment?
Yes.
And by third quarter, you're talking third quarter fiscally, not third quarter of any type of athletic contest.
Definitely.
Although sometimes in the third quarter of athletic contest, you can pretty much figure it out too.
There it goes. All right.
But not always. You always got to
Not
wait to
always.
the end. And we'll talk about that next week. Any additional questions for Mr. McCall, Ms. Hinckley, Mr. DeBow from any members of council? Seeing none, thank you all for being here and providing testimony. We will now go back. Well, that concludes this panel. Mr. Arnuzzi, if you can read the witnesses for the next panel, and then we'll proceed.
Jackie Dunn, City Treasurer, City of Philadelphia.
Welcome back, Ms. Dunn. And I see you're accompanied by Ms. Dominguez Buckley. You've stated your name for the record, but please do so and then proceed.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Green and members of the Committee on Finance. I'm Jackie Dunn, City Treasurer, and with me this afternoon are Natalia Dominguez Buckley, First Deputy City Treasurer, Shakina Clark, Assistant City Treasurer for Banking, and representatives from Citizens Bank. I'm here to testify in favor of Bill number 220510, This bill would provide authorization for the city to enter into an amendment agreement with Citizens Bank for provision of payroll depository banking service for city employees for an additional one-year term starting July 1, 2022, running through June 30th, 2023, under certain terms and conditions. By way of background, in June 2006, the city enacted legislation that required the Treasurer's Office to implement a request for proposal process, seeking proposals from qualified institutions to provide banking services that include payments to employees, payroll deductions, and payroll taxes. The legislation also required that no contract amendment with a proposed recipient of payroll banking services be executed until it's approved by City Council with an ordinance. In 2021, our office issued a payroll banking services RFP, and the selection committee determined that Citizens Bank was the most qualified institution based on the quality of service provided, cost, extensive branch network, and commitments to communities across the city. In June 2021, City Council approved a Citizens Bank 6-month term, and in October 2021, Council approved an additional 6-month term to complete the first year of the new contract. With Council's approval, our office is requesting to contract with Citizens Bank for such services for an additional year with an amendment through June 30th, 2023. I respectfully request that the committee report the bill with a favorable recommendation and a suspension of the rules as to permit first reading at the next session of council. Thank you for your consideration and opportunity to testify. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Treasurer Dunn. I may have missed something. Ms. Clark, is this a new position within the Treasurer's Office? Because I heard Assistant City Treasurer for Banking, and I wasn't aware we had that position. So if I'm wrong, please let me know.
I'm a new employee, but the position is not new.
Okay.
I replaced Mark DiSilvestro. I've been with the city since November.
Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to
Thank
that
you.
position. For some reason, that position, I never heard it referred to as, maybe it was just Assistant City Treasurer, but Assistant City Treasurer Banking. That's what kind of piqued my ear when
She
I heard
comes
that.
with a wealth of knowledge, so we're excited that she's part of our team.
Well, Ms. Clark, please, so this is your first time testifying in City Council?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so feel free to provide a little background on your experience.
I've been in the banking industry for over 15 years. I come from Santander Bank. I was also employed with Citizens Bank. I'm happy to be a part of the city and a part of this council today. It's very exciting. I pretty much do all the maintenance and new account openings for the city right now. And I'm a part of the new city project, the Treasury Management System. And I oversee the 2 clerks that disperse the city's checks.
Okay, well, welcome. Wanted to make sure you had the full City Council hearing experience. I'll hold back any council members that have aggressive questioning. Not that anyone on this body would do that, but just wanted to say welcome and thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Are there members of council who'd like to ask any questions to this panel?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Let's get to the serious question about our new member. What part of the city you live in?
I live in the Northeast.
Point of information, Ms. Clark, before you answer that question.
Okay.
Sometimes council members provide opportunities for future challenges.
Okay.
So you are a member of the Treasurer's Office that, like myself, represent the entire city of Philadelphia.
Yes,
So
yes.
please proceed.
Good answer. Good answer. Welcome on board.
Thank you. So I don't have to answer it. Good.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for this panel? Oh, one last question. When will the next RFP come up for deposit services?
This would be the start of year 2 under what at maximum could be a 4-year contract. And so we would be issuing the next RFP sometime about a year and a half from now.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much for all of your testimony. Mr. Iannuzzi, if you can proceed with the next panel.
Liz Hirsch, Director of the Office of Homeless Services for the City of Philadelphia.
Good afternoon. This is Liz Hirsch. I'm the director of the city's Office of Homeless Services. Thank you for this opportunity, Councilmember Green and other members of the Finance Committee, to testify in support of Bill number 220508, authorizing the Philadelphia Office of Planning and Development to file application with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, approving a substantial amendment to the Annual Action Plan 21-22, adding $42 million, $7,561 in one-time funds to the Home Investment Partnership Program through the American Rescue Plan, known as Home ARP. This is a new program. It's a one-time program. So I'm just going to explain it briefly, as briefly and succinctly as I can so people get the sense of it. This came out of the American Rescue Plan. As stated, it's $42 million, and it is exclusively to provide homeless assistance systems with one-time funds to support an equitable recovery from the COVID pandemic. The intent of the legislation is to provide long-term housing and services for those experiencing homelessness. Quite simply, as we say, housed people are not homeless. And the reason that we have homelessness in this city and throughout this nation is that there's not enough deeply affordable housing for those who need it. The legislation required the city, all cities, to go through a very detailed planning process that involved considerable community engagement. So let me just briefly talk to you about what we did over the past several months to get input from our community about how our community wanted to invest these dollars, these very precious one-time dollars. We put out a survey online in both Spanish and English for nearly 2 months, and got almost 900 people to respond to it, a quarter of whom were people with lived experience of homelessness. We held several focus groups in person and online, including at many of our programs, and we consulted with over 40 organizations to get their sense of what was the priority needs. In addition, we did a needs assessment and gaps assessment of the homeless assistance system and the local housing market. So 2 sources of data: what our community really wants, especially those people with lived experience of homelessness, and what the market data tells us. Based on this lengthy and thorough process, we identified priority activities and qualifying populations. And this is important. There's 2 elements to this. One is, what can you do? And one is, who do you help? What are the priority activities and the priority populations? Once we drafted this plan, we put it out for public comment. It was out for public comment again in both Spanish and English. And all of those comments that we got, about 40 comments, have been recorded as part of the plan. So let me tell you briefly what's in the plan. The plan is over 100 pages, and you're more than welcome to read it. We also posted an executive summary, which is like 12 pages, and we provided an infographic that's just 1 page. Basically, what our community told us is that the top priority population is people who are literally homeless. Literally homeless. The second priority population is people who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. So literally homeless, top priority population. Survivors of DV or fleeing DV, second priority. Third was populations where supportive services or assistance would prevent a family's homelessness or serve those with greatest risk of housing stability. Fourth was at risk. And fifth was veterans. So literally homeless, and survivors of DV being the priority. And I will note that within the priorities populations, we have a number of what we call subpopulations: chronically homeless, young adults, older adults, families, returning citizens, people with a variety of disabilities. They would all be included in those prioritized populations. Now, on the activities side, the consultation, the community engagement process, and the market analysis prioritize the activities that we should engage in the following order. So it's the prioritization. Top priority: acquisition, rehabilitation, and development of affordable rental housing, which includes but not limited to manufactured housing, single room occupancies known as SROs, efficiency apartments, supportive housing. The second top priority activity was time-limited tenant-based rental assistance to qualifying populations, which includes payments to cover housing costs related, such as rent, security deposits, utility deposits. Again, time limited. Third priority activity was supportive services, which includes housing search, legal services, life skills, case management, transportation. But here's the caveat. Everything comes with caveats from HUD. It's only for those people who are benefiting from the home ARPA funded activities. And the fourth priority was the acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter. So these are facilities where people have their own room, but they may have a community room or shared kitchens and bathrooms. Based on all of this input and the market analysis, the plan recommends that 55% of the funds be used for acquisition and development of affordable rental housing, as noted. That 12% be used for that time-limited tenant-based rental assistance. That 12% be used for supportive services. Again, that's the statutory limit for people in support of those activities. And 5% be used for the acquisition and development of non-congregate shelters. 3% is planned for nonprofit operating, again, limited to home ARPA activities. 3% for nonprofit capacity building, again, for home ARPA activities. And 10% for administration and planning for home ARPA activities, again, largely to go to the nonprofits who are operating these programs. There are some caveats. As we said, the money, while it has the priority is on permanent housing, there is flexibility in the plan. Once the plan is adopted and submitted to HUD and they accept it, if there are changes that we want to make, we are welcome to do that. And here's the other thing. We are relying on our community. These programs will be put out for RFP. We're looking to the ingenuity, the creativity, the innovation of our community to propose within these parameters of serving those who are literally homeless and expanding affordable housing to come up with some brilliant ideas and plans that we can then implement. We anticipate that based on this plan, we would develop somewhere in the neighborhood of 545 units of affordable housing. This includes about 200 tenant-based rental assistance. Of course, this is just a plan. We'll have to see what people come up with. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present. We're very excited to get this plan submitted to HUD so we can start with, putting out RFPs as soon as possible. And to permit the expeditious transmittal, we are respectfully requesting that that bill number 5220508 be reported out of the Finance Committee and that the rules be suspended to allow first reading at the next council session. I'm available for questions, and thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsch, for your testimony. I have a few questions, and then we'll hear from council members Sanchez and Gim, who have questions as well.
Yep.
It's been some time since I worked in the law department where I used to represent what was then called the Office of Housing and Community Development. So I'm familiar with home funds, but not home ARPA funds. So I know under the American Rescue Plan, those dollars have to be spent by December 31st, 2024. But home ARPA dollars, what are the additional requirements under home funds that are now being used as part of home ARPA in reference to those dollars?
Well, the first thing is the good news is that these funds, we have 8 years to use them because so much of it is for rehabilitation, acquisition, and development of efficient, effective models of permanent housing. They have given us more time. Of course, we feel it's urgent. In terms of what's different with this, we have 100 pages of regulations, to be honest with you, Councilmember Green. It really is kind of a mashup between what's in the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act and the home investment, because it really is tailored to address the disparate impact that people experiencing homelessness had from COVID, and really, frankly, to center racial equity and to try and make it right for some of the people who were so harmed by the pandemic.
So under the Code of Federal Regulations that, I'm familiar with them regarding home and McKinney and Shelter Plus Care, community development block grant dollars, there are certain things that you have to do, but they're also done that provide some flexibility. And so looking at and listening to your testimony in reference to how you're spending dollars, is there you said it was a preference for stabilization, and I believe of the home ARPA dollars, there's about $23 million going to be spent on new production of units. Is that based on the regs, or is that based on the decision made by the administration to spend that amount on new production?
Well, it's based on all the community input about what the priorities are. So that's really what we were looking at. We were really trying to represent what the community expressed, and then also looking at where the gaps and needs within our service systems are. For example, the Housing Action Plan, looking at the utilization. So that's where that priority came from. The statutory limits are within supportive services, and then the operating, capacity building, and admin.
Okay. So in your beginning of your testimony, you talked about the community input from individuals and also from organizations. I have received information from the various organizations that have come together regarding their concern regarding the amount of money of the home ARPA dollars being allocated for production. And I am someone that is very cognizant of the significant challenges of production for affordable housing in the city of Philadelphia. And that's why I introduced them with the support members of council and the public and the citizens of the city of Philadelphia. We dedicated 0.5% of the general fund dollars going forward to the Housing Trust Fund. And then just more recently, I introduced a bill with the support of the BIA and also Affordable Communities Coalition to support SRO opportunities in the city of Philadelphia. But from some of the groups, and it was a strong group of organizations, really had a concern that only $5 million of the $14 million of home ARPA funds are being used for prevention, and felt it should be a higher amount, like $15 million, as opposed to the $23 million for production. So in response to that question, hearing that question, what's your response to that concern, considering all of the work that we've done as a city in reference to eviction issues and prevention and using our ARPA dollars in that context, and the fact that we're seeing significant increases in the cost of everything in reference to inflation. And unfortunately, a number of property owners are now moving to get out of multifamily housing by either making their homes, making their properties totally residential for occupancy and not multifamily, as well as selling properties as well. And so we're having even more of a challenge in reference to evictions and housing. And so what would be your response to those who would raise that question?
Yeah, very good questions. And we, of course, have been listening to all of the input. So let me just sort of tease apart the elements of that question. First of all, this revenue source would support the development of SROs. It would, having the authorization to do SROs as proposed in your bill, we think would be very powerful, a very efficient model to expand the availability of affordable housing and a very cost-effective model. And this funding would be available to use for that purpose. And I think for a city that has so many vacant, blighted buildings, and empty convents, rectories, halfway houses, etc., there's a real opportunity here to repurpose that. I think one of the things we hear a lot is, how is it that the city can have so many empty houses and so many homeless people? So I think this is a one-time opportunity to address that issue. I guess the second thing I want to say is that the Office of Homeless Services is really not the leader on the eviction defense and eviction prevention. 3 years ago, we realized that the expertise and capacity for addressing eviction defense and prevention really was located within the Division of Housing and Community Development and within the network of housing counseling agencies. And some of this came out of the eviction task force. And so we really bifurcated our functions and clarified them. So the Office of Homeless Services, frankly, a relatively small portion of what we do is eviction prevention and defense. We have a very robust program through DHCD, through the eviction prevention program. What OHS does really is focus on people who aren't leaseholders. Most of the people come to us for prevention. First of all, they're poor. Many of them have never had a lease, or if they had a lease, it was so many years ago. And so we really focus on multi-month assistance for them. All of that can be done within this plan. There's nothing to stop us once the plan is approved to change those numbers. We can easily do that if it really turns out to be a gap. Hopefully some of the eviction defense work will be funded elsewhere, where there is flexibility. And I think the only other thing I would say is we really did go through a very lengthy process. We did hear from literally over 1,000 people. And the consensus really was the literally homeless. So I do want to be honoring and respectful of that input as well. But I think the bottom line here is there's flexibility. There's flexibility. Once this plan is approved, once it's accepted by HUD, we can see what proposals come in and we can flex.
That actually raises some additional questions in my mind, but I want to give an opportunity for members of this committee to ask questions. So we'll start in this order: Councilmember Sanchez, Councilmember Gim, and then Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Liz. I had an opportunity to meet with Liz prior to this hearing, and so some of the questions she is expecting as they're queued up, because they're very important for me to get on the record. But I did want to take an opportunity, Mr. Chair, to kind of echo a little bit of your concerns around how the decision making and the distributions of these funds are being allocated. And while I appreciate Liz saying that there's some flexibility, I'm going to ask her some of this stuff for the record. One of my concerns is, as much as I appreciate community input, we have a housing action plan. So can you specify for me the alignment between this amount of one-time allocation with the housing action plan?
Yeah, I think it's very consistent with the Housing Action Plan. I think absolutely alignment with the Housing Action Plan is critically needed. I think the Housing Action Plan really clearly articulated the need for additional permanent supportive housing. So here's a thing that I think sometimes people are not familiar with, and I know that many of the members of this committee are, but I think it bears saying, which is that affordable housing is not necessarily affordable to people experiencing homelessness. The average income of our participants when they have income is $10,000, and it's not unusual for them to have zero income. And frankly, most affordable housing that's developed, because it requires the low-income housing tax credit, which is federal, really doesn't meet their needs. And so this is really targeted to be very deeply affordable, and 70% of these dollars do have to be used for people experiencing homelessness. So it really is kind of a deeper dive. I think it actually, Councilmember Sanchez, it actually advances achievement of the Housing Action Plan.
So again, we had an opportunity to talk a little bit around this work. My concern is around the production side, as I expressed to you. What are the models of production that you're going to produce for this, as you say, very unique population because of the level of AMIs that we're dealing with? What is going to be the return on investment? My concern is that, as you know, the affordable housing space, as the chairman alluded to, we're spending $380,000, $400,000 to create a unit, right? And are you going to be using this model or more efficient models, because we need to scale up the availability of units for this unique population? So tell me on the production side, what is going to be the cost per unit that you're projecting in the investment that you're doing?
Right. I don't have the number about cost per unit, but I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. I don't know where it's coming from. If other people are getting it. I think that you've raised a really good question about, and a really important point for us to take a deeper dive into, which is the efficient models. We have some models that we've been piloting. We're, looking at SROs are a big one because of the available stock. We're looking at shared housing. We're looking at the rehabilitation of scattered site PHA units, which we're doing already in shared housing. We're looking at efficiencies, I think are very important, of the smaller units, which this legislation allows, manufactured housing, which we're piloting right now with planning and development. And I think we're also looking to our community to come up with some alternatives for us. And frankly, I think we're going to have to do partnerships. I don't think we're going to be going it alone. I think we're going to be working with planning and development, PHDC, with PHA to try and maximize the input, because I think they know that it's too expensive for our people. And so if we can partner up, we can get some more families out of homeless shelters.
No, I agree with you. And I think,
hold on one second. Anyone that's not speaking, please mute your microphone so we don't have that background noise, to make it easier for all the witnesses to hear each other as well as for the stenographer. Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you. As we spoke, one of my things around what models are we going to be doing, and I hear that you're talking about innovation, but we have to be responsible stewards with this one-time money, right? And so I'm very concerned that it's sort of like, it's everywhere. I mean, I think we need, our role in this finance committee and our role as city council is to make sure that that we're spending this money wisely. And, I don't want to be in support of any plan that is so vague that we don't know, right? And I don't need, given the issue of homelessness in the city of Philadelphia, for us to engage in product lines that are way out of whack with the reality of what we're doing. This, again, you have been, and your office has been involved in some of these where, we're spending $400,000 a unit and still subsidizing at $500 a month rent for folks. There's no efficiency in this, right? And we've talked about some of the transitional housing stuff, and I know you've started to move away from it. So I need a little bit more assurances around this, because I think that our housing action plan, in addition to the SROs, which I think it's a great idea, I said to you, the efficiencies, the rooming houses, like this is the pot of money where we're supposed to do the stuff that we can't do in OHCD and we can't do in other places. And I'm still not feeling reassured that you're not going to enter into models that are inefficient, because you're not committing to we're going to do so many units and this is what we're going to get. Like you don't have a goal yet. And that's concerning to me.
Yeah, our goal is 545 units, 200 of which would be tenant-based rental assistance. This was developed together with the Office of Planning and Development. I think it's a really good point. And what we've done, and I didn't go through it in my testimony, I do apologize, council member. What we did was we have laid out examples of projects that could be invested in, how much they would cost, how many units, how many beds, and what the cost, what the total configuration would be, and that is detailed in our plan. I think one of the things that we're excited about, for example, that really actually came from some of your input, frankly, was converting transitional housing into permanent housing. Some of our transitional housing is in great neighborhoods that we could never acquire the buildings anymore, and they're already owned by nonprofits. I think we have 6 or 8. We have nonprofits that people have donated houses to them, several houses sometimes on a block. They haven't had a revenue source to enable them to fix up those units and make them available. So I think that is the opportunity that exists here that, frankly, doesn't exist in our traditional kinds of sources.
And finally, again, we had this part of this discussion. Again, I'm very concerned about how we utilize, this budget and this allocation. But one of the things that I want to go on the record on that I know this is a decision that you've made and we've had this discussion in the past. I believe that eviction prevention and all of those issues should be part of your portfolio and part of the work that we do. And I know that, we've had this debate and, there's internal debates. OHCD feels a certain way. You feel a certain way. For the Office of Emergency Housing not to be and have significant skin in the game to prevent people from entering your portfolio is something that I disagree with you on. And I disagree with you strongly because, as you know, we're about to do these property assessments, and I mentioned this to you in our discussion. We're about to do these property assessments, and we're going to be able to do a lot of things to protect homeowners, but we're not going to have $300 million to give to renters, right? And to that rental community. And so I'd like to see us, and I'd like to see your office understand that that prevention work is part of your portfolio and should be part of your portfolio. And we're going to need it to be part of your portfolio because we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be priced out of their rental, and we're going to be limited in the work that we do. So I think that given COVID, given what we've learned, your unit insisting that that's not their work, if we fail someone and we don't keep someone in their home, they're going to end up in your system at a more costly situation. So we need to continue that conversation. And so I wanted to just, again, put that on the record that I disagree with you. The Office of Housing and Community Development has done all it can to support some of the eviction diversion work. And I'm sure my council colleague, Councilwoman Gim, is going to be bringing in and detailing that. But homeless prevention is key, and it has to be, we have to double down on it, particularly in the rental space. And so I want to continue that conversation because I'm in disagreement with you around the utilization on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Noted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez, Councilmember Gim, then Councilmember Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Quinones Sanchez, for asking those important questions, and very supportive of some of the concerns around that. Liz, I want to thank you, for your early partnership a number of years ago to support young people facing homelessness. We were able to get the first line item budget for youth homelessness. And we, you've started a number of different efforts, but as you may know, and as certainly all the members of the Finance Committee saw, we've had some heart-wrenching testimony from young people themselves about their experiences with homelessness, and in particular about, the rise and concern about youth homelessness specifically that many of our advocates who have either submitted testimony or maybe testifying later today have raised with us. Your office has relied on many of these homeless prevention agencies when families with young children have suddenly been locked out, evicted, seniors, we know that people are running out of money, and it's very much a crisis right now. So, I'm interested in hearing specifically about the level of investment for youth homelessness prevention and the number of young people that you're expected to reach under your current funds.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Gimm, and thank you for your leadership very early on, 6 years ago, in getting some of that first investment in youth homelessness. I think at that time we recognized that HUD didn't recognize youth homelessness between 18 and 24 as different from adults, and homeless systems historically had seen 18-year-olds as adults, and we know that it's true in some ways and not in others. So let me just very quickly summarize where we are. We last year spent about $7 or $8 million on targeted specifically to young adults 18 to 24. We have 29 programs now that serve young adults 18 to 24, and our very first award of the NPI dollars is going to be to Covenant House Rites of Passage for I believe it's 12 units of transitional and longer term housing for young adults, and especially for parenting young adults. So we're really excited about that opportunity. At this point in time, let me just say, young adults are absolutely a priority population. We envision that we would put out one of our first RFPs would have extra points or prioritization for young adults because of their level of vulnerability, and more than their level of vulnerability, and I know you really get this, council member, it's their resilience, their drive to growth. We don't want to miss that opportunity. So we do see that absolutely as a priority. And I think really we're looking to that community to tell us what they can do. We met with Philly Homes for Youth Coalition about 3 months ago, and they came to us with a list of things that they wanted to fund. And we said, send us the proposals. Tell us what those programs are. Give us the numbers. Give us the budgets. We haven't yet gotten those, but we're really excited to see what they come up with in terms of concrete proposals that we can fund. Because I think the usual ways of doing business don't work for young adults. They need a longer runway. To get through college. We're actually in partnership with PHA and CCP now for 16 young adults who are Cato scholars to have housing, and we'd love to expand that. So we're really hoping that the experts, the young adult providers, and that the young adults themselves will really take the flexibility, take the opportunity of these RFPs, and there's room in every single one of these categories for them to propose ideas to us that then we can fund.
So I'm not sure what happened, but I have the list of and have had the list of recommendations from the Philly Homes for Youth Coalition, which includes $8 million set aside specifically for expanding and addressing, youth homelessness. Now, one of the things that I think is really important is that, again, I wanted to open by thanking you for being, at the front end of the youth homelessness work in 2016. But this is 2022. with a infrastructure system that has completely fallen apart around young people, and no one is hurt more than our youth. When schools fall apart, when we're not reaching young people, we've got more young people disengaged, if not, removed from schooling right now. The bottom has fallen out of the economy for a number of people, and our city agencies haven't been completely there for everybody as well. I mean, I think that everybody's doing the best they can, but I think we should acknowledge that what we're looking for right now is not whether we're giving out grants as we normally do, but what different things are we doing? So the Philly Homes for Youth recommendations, there are a number of them, which includes like very much of an externalized effort because we can't find people that we're not looking to find. Like they're not going to come to us. So there was a discussion about a team of youth navigators, for example, who can reach out and connect more aggressively to homeless youth, help connect them to the systems of care, much like what you have been doing when, I can call you for like questions or concerns about neighborhoods that are dealing with, homelessness in public areas. I think that Philly Homes for Youth is asking specifically for the youth navigators to try and locate homeless youth who may be couch surfing and others. I know another one is about specific programs that are working with landlords, and I have a very partial interest in how we're working with pregnant and parenting teens and pregnant and parenting youth, because this is and who are homeless, by the way, because this is a very, very vulnerable population. There are weird things around DHS and services through them. So once they themselves are a youth, but they are pregnant and parenting, like the number of options really narrowed down. And we're definitely hearing from our advocates that landlords are afraid to rent to them or concerned about such young people. And so we need to think about a strategy for that. But the list of proposals I've received is estimated at $8 million. It has been sent around to our entire finance committee finance committee, and we will send it directly to you and expect that you'll be able to reach out to them about it. But I wanted to hear just some of your thoughts on those two things.
Well, I can't really add much. I totally agree with you, and I agree with the coalition. We did fund one youth navigator so far. We'd love to fund more. We absolutely agree that the bias against young adults when they go to rent units is significant. Housing search and support for that is one of the activities that we would be looking to fund. It's certainly allowable within this. So, and I think I agree with you about the pregnant and parenting youth, which is one of the reasons I'm really excited about the Covenant House project. And of course, they would fall within the category of families and would be prioritized within some of the existing programs we have. But yes, we would absolutely be looking to expand that. Any of those things that they would present to us, and we welcome the opportunity to continue to work with them and for them to submit. And I just one other thing, which is that we are submitting a proposal to HUD at the end of this month for the Youth Homeless Development Project Program, YHDP. And so we will be asking HUD for money to help specifically for youth homelessness. And we've met with Philly Homes for Youth, I think we've done 6 focus groups with young adults with lived experience of homelessness to put together the list of activities, some of which you've noted here, that we would put into the proposal to HUD, really to try and get some additional dedicated funding to add on to what's available through Home ARP.
Do you have, could you respond to the question about the youth and the $8 million proposal? Is there a money that, could be going towards that $8 million mark, which is about 20% of the ARP funds that are there that could potentially be dedicated to this?
Yeah, I think what we want to do is to look at what kind of proposals come in and try to maximize the dollars available. And as I said, we would put out an RFP. Our first RFP will prioritize young adults to try and get some of those ideas. As you know, council member, the city doesn't provide most services. It's all done through vendors and through nonprofits. So we need our nonprofits, the people are really on the ground who have the expertise, to come to us with a proposal, with specific ideas, with a budget that's actionable within the framework of a fair, transparent process. And then that's how we are able to get that funding going.
And again, I'll say I've had these recommendations for a number of weeks, I believe. I think I've had them for a while. I hope I have them. Anyway,
Yeah.
our entire finance committee has them. But the request is that if that is the case, can OHS commit to setting aside 20%, up to 20% of the ARP funds dedicated specifically to youth homelessness?
I think what we have not set aside percentages for any of our subpopulations. And, to be perfectly frank with you, we have so many requests for a 20% set aside that we'd have 200% used up. It's like, how do you divide up the pie? And so it would certainly be our hope to be able to fund as many of the youth proposals as possible. And I will say, so as I've said, I would say the other thing is that, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Give me a second. So putting out the RPs, yeah. So I think we have we do have a lot of vulnerable constituencies, and this money is not going to end. This money's not going to end homelessness. It's a fraction of what's needed. We had 15,000 people touch our system last year, and so. The system that we have in place, and you can disagree or agree, but what HUD dictates to us is that we use vulnerability as the scale. And so if someone comes in who's 92 and highly vulnerable, or 18 and highly vulnerable, we look at deploying those resources based on vulnerability, and that's what we're required to do by HUD. So I think the short answer to your question is we're really excited to get those proposals in so that we can start funding some of those really exciting ideas that everybody has. And I think step one is to get this plan submitted to HUD as quickly as possible so that we can start getting those RFPs out on the street, so we can start getting the money out on the street to actually deploy some of these ideas.
And what's the goal in terms of the amount of funding you're seeking from HUD that's specific to youth homelessness?
We don't have specific numbers related to any subpopulation at this point in time. What we have is the prioritization on those who are literally homeless being at the top of the list, and then victims, survivors of DV being second, third being people who were an intervention of services, where they're basically imminently homeless. Fourth is at risk of homelessness, and fifth is veterans.
Yeah.
So within each of those qualifying populations, it includes, for example, frail elderly who are on the street. It includes young adults, 18 to 24, families with children. All of those populations are included within that.
I mean, I think one of the concerns, and, I'll let it go from here because I think we're going to have to follow up. And, I'll make sure that, as I said, again, we'll forward over the Philly Homes for Youth proposals that we had received. But, they're very clear about the 8 million. But I think the concern is that youth continue to not be, I know that they can be embedded within many things, but part of the problem that we have with youth homelessness and what we're hearing over and over and over again is that the vulnerable populations that you're dealing with later in life start as young people who we can't see or don't take the time to look for at a stage where they could have things turn around for them. And then they become potentially part of a longer term, more serious homeless population. And so, or population that's experiencing homelessness. So, you know, I have a focus on this group of young people. You know, again, as I said, I don't think the city takes care of vulnerable young people enough right now, and I'm anxious about it because I think it creates significant problems later on. That doesn't mean that we haven't done something. I do think we need to do something differently. They can't be simply embedded in things. I think if we don't have a strategy for youth, we tend to miss them. And I think we figured that out when we started doing the initial youth homelessness work together. It would be good for us to realign those. So those are all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gim. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I remember, Liz, when your second day, it might have been, or your second week, you have changed. I'll just say that. The weight of our issue has matured you quickly into understanding the dimensions of the problem. So I was told by some housing counselors that we are expecting a 60,000 homelessness tsunami coming our way. And that probably transcends youth, elderly, and others because of some of the guardrails that were put in place during the pandemic are coming to limited scope. Within that 60,000 tsunami potential of evictions, we have a difference between emergency housing, transitional housing, and affordable housing. Is that correct?
You could say that.
Okay. I met with a interesting group of homelessness advocates as well as HAPCO. And they agreed, which made me really leery, Mr. Chairman, those two groups sitting together in agreement on anything, about the use of funds coming from HUD. And when we categorize it as affordable housing, that there was somewhere around 300 units scheduled to be built. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is the cost of those 300 units? Was it 23 million or 53 million?
23 million. That's what's projected. It's a plan.
All right, so that's 23 million. According to both groups who do not agree on anything, that there might be a better consideration, more return on investment if we looked at existing small property owners, apartment association, HAPCO, working with the Coalition for Homelessness to look at prevention, renovation dollars in that space versus new construction. And I wanted to get some insight on your point of view.
Yes, we've heard from them also, and it is exciting to see them agreeing on something. And I agree.
It was scary. It was scary.
I know. Well, we agree that homelessness prevention, and as Councilmember Sanchez also observed, is really critical. Last year, we helped about 1,900 families, which translates into about 3,000 people, 3,500 people, to prevent homelessness. It is actually very critical. I certainly hope that 60,000 number is wrong. I don't know where it came from, but I'm hoping that doesn't happen. So the intent, so two things I would tell you, Councilmember Jones. One is that we went through a really extensive community engagement process where literally over 1,000 people weighed in, and the top priority was expressed as literally homeless and victim survivors of domestic violence. I feel like my job is to listen to the community, listen to people with lived experience, listen to the people who are on front lines, like the outreach workers, the shelter workers, the intake staff, our network of 70 providers. My job is to listen and then to tell you what they said. And that's what they said. So That I think is number one. I think that I agree that I guess the second thing is the intent of the legislation. Boy, I wish that we could get another $100 or $200 million in that ERAP money so we could continue to help people stay in their apartments and prevent eviction. We're not going to be able to solve that problem with this little money. This money, I'm going to go back to what I said, and I've said it a million times. Housed people are not homeless. And if we can help people get out of shelters and get off the street and into places where they have their own room or their own apartment, that is the solution. And so that is very, very important to us. And, we're in the land of tough decisions, right? 15,000 people touched our system last year. 1,000 young adults, 18 to 24, used our system. We have to make tough decisions. The intent of this money really is to house people. That's what our community wants. That's what the Housing Action Plan says. That's where the biggest gap is. So that's what we've reflected in the plan. Listen, if that tsunami comes, once the plan is adopted, which we hope will happen, as is, if we have to adjust, we're going to adjust, just like we did during COVID. We never anticipated, so that's
Liz, that's what I want to hear, because simple math, 60,000 potential, let's cut it in half to 30, right? Hitting a population 300 units or so is not going to be a good life raft in that tsunami. We might get a lot more if we work with small apartment owners to say, we want to help you out. We made some mistakes in the past. We gave PPP money directly to people that sometimes did not even pay their rent, kept it moving, and still were at risk for homelessness. So taking what we've learned, taking those creative partnerships that I talked about, look how much that 23 million might be spread out if we do it right, saving more people from the shelters. So I'd love you to provide that analysis to the chairman, see which way we should go. Granted, our housing committee is knee deep into this stuff. You should also send it to them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. I see Councilmember Dom has a question for
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Hirsch.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Ms. Hirsch. Good afternoon. I have a question on is it 23 million roughly the acquisition and development of affordable rental housing?
That's what's in the plan currently, yes.
And is that specifically for 351 new or rehabilitated housing units?
That's the projection, yes. We'll have to see how it plays out once we start to look at those efficient and effective models, what we're able to do using what comes in and through partnerships with some of the other entities.
When you say 351 new or rehabilitated housing units, is that all purchased, or is that some of that rental that we're renting from third party?
No, that's only rental. This legislation prohibits the use of this money for home ownership or for home ownership counseling.
So are you saying this money's for renting 351 apartments?
No, it's for it's for the acquisition, preservation, and development of affordable rental units.
Right, and you're saying the average is going to cost just over 60,000. It sounds like per unit.
Slightly more than that. That's the projection. Maybe overly optimistic. It may turn out that costs more, but that's what we're looking at right now, based on some of the projections that we've done.
Can you give me an idea of how that's going to work? So between 60 and 65,000 a unit. What will that look like? How are you going to do that?
Yeah, as I said, well, first of all, I think we have to wait and see also what our community comes back with. So we have several ideas that are laid out in the plan of how we might work, how we might get there. But for example, we have We have several providers who have been given donated houses that are basically almost move-in ready, that with some tweaks people could move into. We've been in partnership with PHA to renovate scattered site vacant units. We have some of the, as I said, rectories and convents, some of the efficiencies, SROs, manufactured housing. So those are some of the ideas that people have brought to us that they feel could be done effectively and cost effectively and efficiently.
Is this, Liz, are we allowed to, I think a few years ago, I took a tour of a property at the 40th or 41st in Chestnut that was modular housing. It was like 80 or 90 units, and it cost them, at that time, $90,000 a unit. It was about a 600 to 700 square foot space. Beautifully done. I mean, beautifully done. And I think the real market rate would probably be $1,500 to $1,800 for these units, but they were being used for, I think, more affordable type housing. But it seems to me that if we can either partner or find a developer or whatever that can build these even for $110,000, and if we could be the owner of it, we could then float financing for it, even at 5 or 6%. The cost would be $6,000 a year for the interest. Maybe it's $8,000 with principal reduction. And it's much cheaper, and we could get a lot more people in housing than any other plan.
We definitely take a look at that.
I'm happy to help you with it. I think that's the way to go to get more people in, and we can leverage this money better.
Thank you.
And also, if we took a 15 or 20-year mortgage at the end of the time, we'd have no payments. We don't have free and clear.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Don, for your questions to Ms. Hirsch. And Ms. Hirsch, you were on this panel in reference to the bill number 220509, home ARPA dollars. I would like you to stay, and we're now going to hear from Rachel Falco, who also has, well, let me just change the order a little bit. We're going to go with Melissa Long to also testify regarding a separate bill, but also related to this work in reference to the consolidated plan, which is bill number 220508. We'll have Ms. Long testify in regarding the consolidated plan. From there, we would then have other witnesses to testify, which will be Rachel Falco, as well as Jesse Keel, Maria Murray, Liam Spady, and I believe there was one other person to testify on that matter. So Ms. Long, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Sure. Melissa Long, Director, Division of Housing and Community Development. Good afternoon, Chairperson Green and other members of the Finance Committee. I'm Melissa Long, the Director of Programs for the Division of Housing and Community Development. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony on behalf of the administration bill number 220059, which permits the city to apply for the Federal Community Development Block Grant, Home Emergency Solutions, and Housing Opportunities for Person with AIDS, HOPWA funds, and for state funds from the Department of Community and Economic Development. This bill refers to Exhibit A, which is the proposed consolidated plan 2022 to 26, the annual action plan 2022-23, which is the required HUD funding application. The annual action plan 2022-23 details our plan for spending funds from 4 primary federal sources, as well as the state, the local housing trust funds, and the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative NPI funds. As detailed in this action plan, and we just got our awards from HUD very recently, the city was awarded approximately $44 million in CDBG, $13 million in home, $8.7 million in HOPWA, and $3.8 million in ESG. As the plan goals and actions were designed to meet Philadelphia's high priority housing and community development needs, Highlights of these goals are preserve and create affordable homeowner rental housing, reduce homelessness and expand special needs housing, foster open access to all housing and community development resources, address education, economic and income needs of people in neighborhoods, strengthen community assets and manage vacant land to improve the quality of life and promote fair housing and access to opportunities for all Philadelphians. And as we have been discussing, and with my colleague Liz, she mentioned we are grateful that we, for the $260 million in American Recovery and CARES Act funding that kept over 40,000 renters in their homes during the depths of the pandemic. However, at the time that we were forced to stop taking rental assistance applications at the end of the year due to high demand, there was an unmet need of over $300 million. And to date, we've received an additional $34.5 million in reallocated funds, which is a fraction of what our request was. So while our action plan makes strategic investments to address our housing needs, really only a comprehensive and sustained and increased commitment to housing resources will we begin to meet them. We are grateful, I want to say, to the administration and City Council for the new NPI issuance and the city charter change. Thank you, Council Chair Green, of the 0.5% of the city's general fund budget into the Housing Trust Fund to help meet those needs. As detailed in the housing plan, nearly half of all of our funding will go to put people and keep people in their homes. That's the production and preservation of rental housing. We're going to continue foreclosure and eviction prevention programs, home repairs such as basic systems and heater hotline, and rent support. And I will take this minute that, due to these new resources, we were able to identify and propose allocation of $15 million in housing trust funds to be used with assistance for those in eviction diversion in the upcoming year. It also includes programs to prevent homelessness and expand housing for people with special needs. We'll continue to invest in organizations and programs that benefit residents in their communities. This includes our amazing housing counseling agencies, NACs, Neighborhood Advisory Committees, our nonprofit legal services, and our neighborhood energy centers. We are going to be able to continue to provide over $2 million in CARES Act funding to increase their capacity to assist tenants facing eviction. And I'm pleased to report that we have allocated an additional $2 million in support to support the work of housing counseling agencies. Vibrant commercial corridors are also an important element of healthy communities, and accordingly, we invest significant resources in community and economic development. The annual action plan includes funding for business loan programs, business development grants, corridor management, and building improvement support. The upcoming year will continue to be challenging, and we are all committed to working as hard as possible to meet those challenges. Thank you again for the opportunity to present this testimony. For the city to receive its funding from HUD, we are required to submit an approved consolidated plan, annual action plan to HUD no later than August 15th, 2022. To permit expeditious transmittal of this plan, suspension of the rules to permit first reading at the next council session is requested. My colleagues and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Long. Just wanted to follow up when we talked about the conversation that Ms. Hirsch had earlier regarding the eviction prevention, and I know Councilman has raised concerns about the siloed perspective of representatives to agencies. But I want to talk a little bit about the operations of the eviction prevention funds. I totally understand the challenges in implementing, receiving, and providing those resources to individuals. The concern I raise, and this comes from what I saw here in my office. My staff has been working from our city council office since second week of August of last year. And one of the things I noticed, interacting with my staff in my office, is that many people were calling our office asking for the status of those prevention dollars. And we got to a point where we were having some dedicated people within the administration that we could call to kind of get some information. But then we got to a point that we were informed to not to continue to call because the money had ran out. But my concern is that constituents did not know that. They did not know that the money had run out. You had people that were still calling our office, and we didn't have the means of letting them know what the status was of their applications and reference to funding. And it really created a real challenge when you had people that applied weeks, sometimes months earlier for these resources, desperately needing the resources, and were not getting any information about what was happening. And even our office was not getting information at a point about what was happening. And then we didn't have any information for them. And then the response to administration was, the money ran out. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So going forward in reference to, well, one, that should not have happened in that way. There should have been better communication to residents about some of the challenges with the program and the amount of dollars available, so people were not just waiting in limbo, thinking that, well, I applied X period weeks earlier, I still will be able to get resources I critically need, and we're counting on that, and then come find out, well, sorry, all the money ran out. So what's your response to constituents who, from their perspective, this is another example of why they've lost faith in government, because here something was advertised, they applied for these dollars in a way that they thought was the right way. They provided all information. They couldn't get someone within the city. Then they reached out to their council office. Council office was reaching out. And then we just find out, oh, all the money's gone.
Well, I'd want to clarify, not all of the money is gone. We are continuing to get additional, to date, as I stated, from the Department of Treasury and from the state. We've received $34 million in reallocated funds. Yep.
And Ms. Long, I understand that, but the messaging,
Yes.
and I understand that you were constantly trying to get more money and received some reallocated dollars.
Yep.
And during that process, you were getting additional money by the, I would say, aggressiveness that the city went to the federal government saying, listen, we're trying to get money out as fast as possible.
Yep.
And compared to other cities, we probably were in a much better position, did a better job. However, you still had constituents who were told money ran out.
Yeah, and yep. And I think we need to do better about messaging, right? And we made that request at the end of the year for $300 million, and had been waiting from the Department of Treasury, and still, I think we're anticipating some additional funds, and unfortunately, the breadth and depth of the number of applications that we have. We're with my partners at PHDC and all of our partners doing the best that we can, to serve as many within what we have.
I just think from the very beginning, when dollars were received, and we saw very early on the number of applications that were being received, there just should have been some information to communicate to level set expectations, saying that there's a strong possibility that we have, we did have a finite amount of resources. We're continuing asking for more dollars and doing the best we can to advocate for more dollars from the federal government, but letting people know that there's a possibility that we may run out of the money based on the number of people who need these resources. I think if that had been provided early on, it would have given people at least a better context to think that it's not a guarantee if I just apply, I'll get these resources, even if I'm eligible.
Yes, I agree.
Are there other questions from members of council? For Ms. Long or Ms. Hirsch on either the consolidated plan or the issue regarding the home ARPA dollars? And I know we've had a number of questions on that issue. But any questions regarding the consolidated plan for Ms. Long or Ms. Hirsch? All right. Seeing none, I want to thank both of you for your testimony. We're now going to merge two panels together, and this will provide these groups of witnesses to testify on both the home ARPA dollars as well as the consolidated plan. So if the witnesses could be prepared to testify in this order. Rachel Falco, Jesse Keel, Maria Murray, Liam Spady, and any other parties that would like to testify regarding the consolidated plan or the home ARPA dollars. Once again, we'll go in the order of Rachel Falco, Jesse Keel, Maria Murray, and Liam Spady.
Okay, I'm on.
Hold on one second. And I believe we have one other witness that would be testifying with you, Ms. Falco, which is Greg Wortman. So we can have Ms. Falco, Greg Wortman, and then the others that I mentioned, please testify in that order. If you could state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Okay, my name is Rachel Falco, and I'm the Executive Director of Philadelphia Interfaith Hospitality Network, which will soon be known as Family Promise of Philadelphia. We provide emergency housing and homelessness prevention services to families from all zip codes in Philadelphia County, and we're supported greatly by the Office of Homeless Services as well as by private foundations and donations. Before I actually get going, I just want to state that this is very painful testimony for me to make because I have so much respect for Liz and her hardworking team at OSH, and I also have a lot of respect for the gargantuan effort that PHDC and the Housing Department took on in terms of allocating all of the dollars that they had to allocate very, very rapidly in response to the terrific housing crisis that we had. I also want to say that Liz has and OSH has built up a very, very solid department for homelessness prevention and shelter diversion, and I'm very proud to be part of it and proud to, feel very included in being able to offer ideas and have them heard. So that being said, and also acknowledging that there are not going to be very many easy decisions to make. And I do find many of the ideas that Liz put forward today in her testimony to be quite exciting. But I'm here today representing a coalition of homeless prevention service providers that include Congresso, Help USA, People's Emergency Center, Valley Youth House, and my organization, Philadelphia Interfaith Hospitality Network. Our agencies provide direct aid and services to single adults and to families to prevent evictions. We also help displaced people obtain new housing quickly, or housing first, to help them avoid the trauma of needing shelter. Each of our organizations provides services to vulnerable populations, including youth, young parents with children, people with disabilities, and mature households who endure homelessness for the first time due to unemployment, underemployment, or illness. risks that were exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic. My agency focuses on the needs of families, but increasingly we've been welcoming quite a number of elders who are now comprising, a significant share, not the major share of our client base, because their fixed incomes do not keep pace with our inflated rental housing market. We're also joined today by Greg Workman, my unlikely partner in crime here, of HAPCO, which is the Philadelphia chapter of rental property owners. And HAPCO provides approximately 70% of Philadelphia's most affordable market rate opportunities. This hearing likely marks the first time, or one of the few times, that tenants and landlords are actually testifying together. Our collaboration today reflects an understanding that the administration's planned use of the $42 million in home ARPA money funding is critical to the interests of both groups that have been historically vulnerable to homelessness, as well as to people that more recently experience risks to economic insecurity in the wake of the pandemic and inflation. In this context, we urge your committee to review and approve our recommendations to increase funding for prevention services. Eviction rates in Philadelphia are rising. The supply of affordable market rate housing is evaporating due to the difficult climate of doing business and a very hot real estate market. Despite this crisis, the administration proposes to spend only 12% of the home ARP funds for homelessness prevention to help a targeted number of 1,000 households. It chooses to spend 55%, 23 million of these funds, to build 358 units of subsidized housing that will probably take a much longer period of time to complete. We urge you to consider the following points in the context of our call to increase prevention funding. For the last 2 months, prevention service agencies and OSH really don't have a whole lot of eviction prevention funds to address client needs. 2 of the coalition's agencies have a combined waiting list of 2,000 households. As of May, 4,200 eviction cases were already filed in housing court since January of 2022. And at this rate, at least 10,000 households will have cases filed against them by the end of the year. So that's 30,000 pretty vulnerable individuals, approximately. Not 60,000, but 30,000. In 2020, Philadelphia identified 7,881 homeless children and youth. This was through the Philadelphia School District. Trends show that the number of homeless children has increased every year over the past 10 years. At the current rate, Philadelphia could have more than 9,000 homeless children by 2026. Eviction prevention is cost-effective and saves taxpayer dollars. The city has dispersed over $248 million to approximately 38,000 households affected by COVID-19. In fiscal year 21, OHS provided an average of $1,182 in rental assistance per household to 1,873 households. The agency has served, I think it's actually more than this number, 306 households in fiscal year 22. Because our agencies have experience dealing with the provision of emergency housing, combined with robust services, we are capable of responding quickly and intensively. We have included a selection of eviction prevention and shelter diversion stories in the attachments that the council members have received or will receive following this testimony. As you can read in these stories, we understand the complicated issues that vulnerable people face in being housed and are generally successful in providing the services necessary to make the difference, as well as mediating with the property owners to make sure their concerns are addressed. Evidence from large-scale prevention efforts in other cities proves that prevention programs reduce homelessness and save the public money, and that would otherwise be spent on shelter, healthcare institutions, and child welfare. And we're attaching an example of the cost effectiveness of these programs, including an empirical study from Help USA, known in Philadelphia for a variety of transitional rapid rehousing and prevention programs. But in New York City, it implements the New York flagship prevention program, Home Base. In fiscal year 18, the program served 5,631 families. About 5% of these families entered shelter after receiving services, which is much less than the range of otherwise projected outcomes. So, for example, if 15% or 845 members of the population became homeless, 542 more families than that number that received the home-based services would have been homeless. This translates into a cost savings of $26.7 million. Eviction rates are going to exacerbate the extent of inequality in housing stability in Philadelphia, and it is a racial equity concern. Neighborhoods with higher shares of African Americans and renters with median incomes below $25,000 have been historically and disproportionately vulnerable to evictions, even when the trend in overall eviction filings declined from 2015 to 19. These trends illustrate this concern. The highest eviction filing rates for 2017 to 2018 were in West and Southwest Philadelphia, Germantown and West Oak Lane, and North and Lower Northeast Philadelphia, with pockets of 10 to 15% and over 15% eviction filing rates. Filings increased 9% from 2016 to 2018 in locations with median incomes below $25,000. And actually, it was at that time that a lot of the prevention programs really got going in a very strong way. And the city was actually able to close shelter beds before, in 2019, before we ended up with COVID. Eviction filing rates were twice as high in locations with populations of at least 40% African Americans. And that's according to the Reinvestment Fund report. So homelessness prevention funds applied in a timely manner, combined with flexible services, as happens through the emergency programs funded through the Office of Homeless Services, will preserve the more affordable range of the Philadelphia market rate rental stock, and will make it more worthwhile for rental property owners who service 70% of our city's lower income tenants, paying market rate rent, to stay in business and keep renting at the lower end of the market. It will prevent blight and gentrification of neighborhoods that have been home to these households for many years. A fairly status quo budget for prevention services will not go the distance. Child and youth homelessness has increased 30% since 2015. And at the current rate of increase, Philadelphia's next mayor could be seeing 9,000 homeless children by 2025. The rate of eviction filings is increasing rapidly, In 2021, there were 6,873 landlord-tenant cases filed in municipal court. As of May 15th in 2022, there were already 4,202 filed. And at this rate, by the end of the year, we could expect well over 10,000 cases. And that would translate to the 30,000 people. More than 13,000 households have asked the Office of Homeless Services for assistance between July 1st, 21 and January 31st, 22, suggesting our current need. And these are people who are imminently at risk. They're not people who are stably housed at this point. We suggest to the council that investing $15 million in eviction prevention through OSH could be the most cost-effective and equitable use of public funds to address the impending homelessness of our most vulnerable citizens, at an average assistance of $2,500 per household. 6,000 households or 30,000 individuals could be served. The need for affordable housing is, no doubt, really important. But thousands of Philadelphians are on the verge of homelessness and need help today. The administration needs to address eviction swiftly. It must ensure sufficient funds are available to serve these households. And now what I'd like to do is to welcome Greg Wortman. Is that okay?
I know you are making a presentation, and this is for you and also all witnesses, because we have received the testimony. Because we do have a number of people that are here testifying. It really would be beneficial if people can summarize their testimony and not read verbatim from their testimony, because we do have a number of people here today.
Okay, I apologize. Well, I thank you very much for allowing me to come and testify, and Greg is joining me on the panel.
Yes, Mr. Wortman, if you could just state your name for the record and please proceed with your testimony.
My name's Greg Wortman. I am the current president of HAPCO Philadelphia, and I want to thank you for allowing me to testify on behalf of this wonderful coalition that has been formed. We strongly believe that rental property owners and tenants, and I know you're not going to hear this from too many people, but this is how I feel, is that this is a marriage, and we have got to come together as one strong, cohesive unit to address some of the issues, housing issues in the city of Philadelphia. The mission statement of HAPCO is very simple. We're for the preservation of low to moderate affordable housing, as well as an increase and upkeep of everything. So that obviously looks like we're a good fit here for everyone. Over 50% of our members are mom and pops. And right now, there's a major issue with those people going to sell their properties. And right now, and I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody, the affordable housing units are decreasing rather than increasing in the city of Philadelphia. In 2019, it was estimated that we were 40,000 units short of what we needed in affordable housing, and that the pandemic, unfortunately, only has exacerbated that. And of course, study after study has shown that who took the hit? It was mom and pops. One of the best studies that came out from Penn and Harvard. How it's called the Housing Initiative at Harvard and Penn. I'm sure a lot of you council members are familiar with them. How landlords are faring during the COVID-19 pandemic. And what was great about this study is it was specific to Philadelphia. Philadelphia was one of the cities that was specific. In average year, 3.5% of rental properties are listed for sale. In 2020, it jumped to 20.8%. That's huge. And likewise, 5.5% of landlords don't have enough money to reinvest in their house to maintain them. It jumped again in 2020 to 30.5%. Now, we all know that if you don't maintain your property, that property is not going to stay on the market very long. So we need to have the properties maintained. And we certainly don't need to lose any more than what we have. We've lost at HAPCO over 1,000 members. we had about 2,500 to begin with, and we're down to about 15 right now. The other thing that exacerbated this, and it's already been discussed, is about the rental assistance money. Unfortunately, the federal government certainly didn't fund it the way they should have. And instead of 90, I think it was 87,000 people applied. Only 34% of them got the money. 60,000 didn't, and that affected tenants and landlords. See, this is why we have to stay together. It affects both tenant and landlords. I am here today because I believe that these organizations, this coalition of homeless prevention people, need more money. And they've listened to us, and we've talked to them and say, hey, this is what landlords are looking for in funding and in what they need. And they've listened to us. And I strongly urge City Council to listen to this group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. I know Councilmember Jones has a question, but I will allow the other witnesses to testify, and then we'll go into Councilmember Jones's question. We'll go with Liam Spady, Jesse Keel, and Maria Murray.
Alrighty. Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Great. Thanks, Chairman Green. Name is Liam Spady, Temple Public Health student, Philly Homes for Youth co-chair. So I'm going to be very brief in my testimony. Vulnerability and resilience are themes that folks with lived experience and expertise in these spaces are expected to speak out on. But instead, I'm here to say today that we hold the power over our experiences, and we need this body to hold the systems that we have to navigate accountable. We don't just work in these systems from 9 to 5. We have to live in them. These are the very systems and essences that keep many of our folks alive. So instead of vulnerability and resilience today, I'm just want to speak on a little bit of a timeline. So to Council Member Gim's point earlier in 2016, myself and another young adult co-founded the Young Adult Leadership Committee, which stemmed from some volunteer work we had done with the 100-Day Challenge, now in the Philly Homes for Youth Coalition. This was done in partnership with OHS to solve youth homelessness. In 2016, we recognized that landlords stigmatize renting to youth and young adults, and also people who receive public assistance. So we decided to ask for dedicated staff to help youth navigate these systems. And at the time, we did get a staff member or youth navigator. And then we also recognized, or suggested, I should say, a development of specific programs for recruitment, retention, and supporting of landlords willing to rent to transition-aged youth and folks receiving public service. I personally have had challenges looking for units myself, again, facing this instability, and by the end of the month, and focusing on coursework and doing this is impossible. So youth deserve better. We deserve better. I deserve better. This $42 million is very impactful, and I've worked with city leaders for a long time who say we are making progress. My question to you, city leaders, is we are making progress according to whom? Right? These 29 programs that we spoke of earlier, they're not really youth and young adult specific. They've existed for some time, and many of them have impossible hurdles to jump through. Some of them only serve up to 21. HUD's definition is 18 to 24. Again, inadequate is not the word to do justice. Last but not least, these programmatic and structural moves that the city has made are helpful, but they're only inching towards this goal that's miles and miles away. So I urge this body, in all humility, to listen to these recommendations. Youth and young adults who are living with this each and every day, we've been advocating for over 6 years. It's 2022, and we made these recommendations back in 2016. To not be where we need to be is just unacceptable. The emotional labor of advocating for 6 years and still facing insecurity is tiring, and we're tired of being tired. We're burnt out. So please, please, please prioritize. Prioritizing an RFP is not enough for youth and adults. Set aside the 20% and refund the Philly Homes for Youth Coalition, because it's the only body that ensures the community members, people like myself and youth and young adults, are involved in the solution to solving youth homelessness. We need to be at the table. I co-chair the coalition, and we need to authentically be there. So I urge you to implement these recommendations, because again, they're the very essence that keep our folks alive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spady. We'll now hear from Jesse Keel, Maria Murray, and then a question from Councilmember Jones.
Hi.
Please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Jessie Kill. I'm thankful for being here. I appreciate you all holding space to be able to hear testimonies in regards to me specifically. I'm going to be speaking on Bill 2205088, the ARP funds. So I just wanted to open up, right, with like what goes up and never seems to come down, right? Seemingly skyrocketing property increases because there's no rent control. So I am a community organizer, a youth advocate, and a youth mentor who has lived experience of homelessness navigating the Philadelphia system. And my testimony in regards to recommendations for the ARP, I just wanted to bring up Helen Gim for highlighting those recommendations earlier that Philly Homes for Youth Coalition have curated to be able to present to OHS in regards to youth homeless needs and services. Pardon my sirens in the background. We met with Helen Gim back in March, just needing support on a strategy in regards to how to ask for these services. And we appreciate that, you know, we need more young people, and recognizing that we need more young people at the forefront of these conversations when we're determining, you know, distribution of funds from the city. And so our requests for the ARP funds are, in hindsight, mostly due to the city seems to state that there seems to be 9% population of young adult homelessness, but the youth serving providers, that's not what they're witnessing and they're seeing. Their numbers are totally different. And so Ms. Maria had brought up concerns around what does that look like, what's going to be done differently with these funds. And some of those recommendations have been around prevention services, wanting to highlight that because what we're seeing, it seems to be that a lot of organizations are tapping in to wanting to access, right, these funds for young adults. However, they're not upholding their support chain. And so then that eventually brings that young adult back into homelessness. Now they're facing chronic homelessness as an adult who no longer qualifies, right, for young adult money. So that's more money being pulled out. And so, yeah, just wanting to recommend that a larger portion of those ARP funds are given to young adult populations, the young adult subpopulation. It's critical. Young adulthood is critical development for period, and housing will support healthy development. Me, myself, I have secure housing. And from the moment that I was able to secure housing, I was able to complete going to school. I was able to complete design certifications, just being able to level up. And that is what I want to see for other young people, right? They don't have hope because they don't have secure housing. But once they secure that housing, that sigh of relief and that wonderment, right, comes back into their lives of like, okay, I am now able and have the capacity to do this thing. And so, yeah, just wanted to just bring that in, highlight that the young adult population, they're merely surviving, but we would like for them to thrive. So thank you for letting me testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Maria Murray,
Hello, everybody.
Uh, Please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Um, my name's Maria Murray. Um, I'm an advocate for the Juvenile Law Center, for transforming youth, system programs. I would like to work on adjusting house, I can't get it out right. I would like to work on housing stability for youth leaving care because it's a major issue in the community. This issue is important to me because it has affected me and other people around me. The city of Philadelphia needs funding to create housing support, especially for youth, because a lot of youth are at higher risk of being homeless. When youth become homeless, they are will be mostly targeted in harmful situations like human trafficking, petty crimes, violent acts, etc. We are not a subpopulation. We are part of a homeless population in Philadelphia. The general public knows that it is very hard for young adults to obtain housing because youth are not prepared or trained to learn how to live on their own. Youth are not prioritized as a major concern. There is no such thing as perfect. However, for a better city, housing stability for older youth is making a youth a priority and giving them a chance to be successful. Don't dismiss their cases and their cries, their needs for safe environment and affordable housing. Transitional services, rental assistance, program services will help youth get adequate support to help their path of becoming successful. Because if they don't have the proper help, they will not be able to maintain safe and affordable housing. Without the help, youth will be targeted or put in harmful, dangerous situations within the community. Youth should be able to feel safe. They shouldn't have to worry about where they need to lay their head at night in order to be successful. Foster youth are at risk of housing instability because of the barriers they face. Some may come from low-income families. They may be in overcrowding living environments. They may have more barriers than that. For example, the youth may have to deal with having responsibilities and taking care of their families, especially if they come from single-parent homes. The barriers that they face are not acknowledged. Sometimes our barriers are dismissed and overlooked to the point that you feel like they are on their own. Nobody is there to carry their weight on their own. Sometimes we need someone to lean on or a person we can trust to be able to ask for help when we need it, which is why foster youth and other are vulnerable youth should be prioritized. All the policies are important to me. Each and every one of these policies acts should be addressed because these are major concerns in the rising community. We need better services and programs for young youth. We request that you ask OHS to dedicate at least 20% of the ARP funds for targeted programming and support for transitional age young youth. People are homeless, at risk of homelessness, and are at the greater risk of housing instability. I believe that directing this amount of funds in housing and supportive services for transitional age youth is essential to meaningful addressing and preventing youth and young adults homelessness and housing insecurity. If OHS is not willing to allocate 20% of the funds for transitional age youth, housing services and support, I recommend that OHS increase the percentage to nonprofit capacity building from 3% to 13%. I urge that OHS is invest in the building capacity for our providers and developers to better serve transitional age youth. This capacity is currently lacking. The lack of investment in this area has resulted to fewer providers serving transitional age youth, and despite the great need, an increase in building this capacity would have long-lasting positive results. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Murray. Councilmember Jones, I know you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the youth advocates for their testimony. It made me peel my eyes back to see the invisible homeless people I have seen throughout my life. And they don't have the traditional label of homelessness because of their youth. No one kind of gives them that cred. But I remember couch surfers when I was coming up. That would be someplace a couple of days, a week, and then get kicked out. Them winding up at a cousin's basement, staying there until they were discovered there, and all with the burden of having to go to school, having to complete homework assignments, having to do things we take for granted, like have a place to shower. And that transitioning into the abuse part, where insidious individuals take advantage of their vulnerability and send them even further into, in some cases, despair, where they tried to medicate themselves through it. Your testimony reminded me of those individuals. So I am grateful for it, and appreciate your lived experience, and I quote, being shared today for the record. And thank the author of this Member Gim, for being a steady advocate for it. The second part of this, Mr. Chair, is that HAPCO Homeless Advocacy Coalition, which was totally unexpected when I met with them. I didn't know it was going to testify today, but I hope I didn't butcher some of the stats that they gave me. And I think we need to cost effectively look at whether 300 units of affordable housing is worth 3,000 units we might be able to have in that space, working with that coalition. And since we're not going to get this money over again, we need to choose wisely. So I will be in support of that set aside for the young people, but I will also be in support of it, looking at what we can do to spread that money in a more effective way. If half of the tsunami of evictions is true, we're going to need it. We're going to definitely need it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. Are there any other questions for the witnesses for this panel? I do not see any other questions for witnesses on this panel. These panels. Thank you all for your testimony. We're now moving into the next matter, and we have bill number 22093. Mr. Iannuzzi, if you could read the witnesses for that panel, and we can read all the names of the witnesses so they can be prepared to testify, and then we'll go right into the panel on the following bill, 220506.
Emily Shapira, Executive Director of the Philadelphia Energy Authority, followed by Layla Riley, Client Relations Manager at McGran Associates, representing the BIA, and Kevin Malowski, Principal at Carbon Architects, representing the AIA.
Okay. Ms. Shapiro, can you state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, and then we'll hear from the other two witnesses in that order.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman Green, members of the committee. My name is Emily Shapira. I'm the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Energy Authority. I appreciate the opportunity to provide some testimony on 220293 today, which modifies the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy, or CPACE program, to conform with pending Commonwealth legislation. The Philadelphia Energy Authority, as you all know, is an independent municipal authority focused on building a robust, equitable, clean energy economy for Philadelphia. Through the Philadelphia Energy Campaign through 2022, we've helped launch over nearly $300 million in projects and created over 2,500 jobs. PEA is the administrator of Philadelphia's CPACE program. This financing allows commercial property owners to borrow money for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and water conservation projects in a novel way. Repayments are made via special assessment similar to a property tax assessment. CPACE does not use any public funds. It allows building owners to finance projects at attractive rates over long periods of time, making these types of projects cash flow positive. To date, CPACE has brought $69 million of private capital to Philadelphia to make its buildings more efficient, more comfortable, and less expensive to operate. This represents 10 projects over the last 2 years across West Philly, Germantown, Kensington, Harrogate, Old City, the Navy Yard, Center City, and beyond. There are active CPACE programs in 15 counties throughout the Commonwealth, and there's been an investment of more than $88 million statewide, inclusive of Philadelphia's projects. So given the success of the CPACE program to date, PEA and many other organizations are supporting legislation in the Pennsylvania General Assembly to expand the types of projects that are eligible for CPACE in Pennsylvania. The legislation expands eligibility to include 3 things. First is multifamily commercial buildings of more than 5 units. Second is indoor air quality improvements, such as things that would be needed for COVID-19 mitigation. And third, building resiliency improvements. And I'm happy to share more of what that means if that's needed. An expansion of CPACE benefits creates more opportunity for this financing tool to deliver critical new and existing building resilience upgrades, mitigate the spread of indoor airborne contaminants, and create good paying jobs across Pennsylvania. Expansion bills have passed in both the state Senate and House. The bill is currently awaiting concurrence, and we expect its full passage before the chamber's recess on June 30th. We actually just learned this morning that the State House Commerce Committee is planning to consider Senate Bill 635, which is the Senate version of the same exact bill that passed the House earlier this year, next week on the 14th. We are grateful for the support of House Majority Leader Benninghoff and Commerce Committee Chair Rowe for this. There are projects in the pipeline totaling more than $130 million in Philadelphia, nearly $350 million statewide, that would immediately benefit from the expansion of eligibility for CPACE financing. So we're asking Council for your approval of modifying the CPACE program to conform with this pending Commonwealth legislation to ensure that we can immediately move towards implementation once the bill is completed at the state level. And as the administrator of the Philadelphia CPACE program, of course, we're happy to follow up with any additional details about completed projects in Philly or those that are waiting on the expansion of eligibility requirements. We'd be very grateful for this committee's support of this bill. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Shapira. The next witness is Layla Riley, and then Kevin Malowski.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lila Coelho Riley, and I work for McGran Associates, an engineering, sustainability, and building science practice focused on residential and multifamily buildings. I'm also on the board of the BIA and co-chair of the Building Innovation Committee, a group that promotes sustainable building techniques, design strategies in construction industry that lessen the negative impacts on the environment and benefit the health and well-being of occupants. So I want to thank the Chairman Green today and the rest of the committee for allowing me to provide testimony today on behalf of the BIA to support Bill number 220293, which we believe can have a meaningful impact on the health, safety, and quality of living for more Philadelphians. So this bill proposes the expansion of the CPACE program in Philadelphia, which currently is only offered to certain commercial buildings. And the expansion would allow multifamily buildings to leverage funds for taking measures to address indoor air quality and resiliency in buildings as well. CPACE financing could be a powerful force in moving projects forward and delivering higher quality housing products compared to code-built properties. First, expanding CPACE funding to include multifamily has the potential to create more affordable housing outside of LIHTC for moderate income households. We have not seen enough tax credit dollars flowing into the city at the rate we need given our high poverty rates. Opening up this funding could give City Council an avenue to work on this issue without having to plead with Harrisburg to redirect more dollars our way. Furthermore, this type of financing can offer support to project teams that have difficulty accessing capital, specifically minority, women, and disadvantaged entrepreneurs. CPACE funding would lower the bar to entry for securing capital, as well as provide relief with the cash flow needed to manage hard and soft costs on projects, greatly reducing the typical burdens and improving the ability to create successful investments in their business and their local communities. The other elements of this bill would cover investments in indoor air quality and resiliency for new and existing properties. This is essentially creating a new financial vehicle to fund investments to future-proof buildings from natural disasters and epidemics. We know from science and life with COVID that low toxicity materials and proper ventilation are an important part in creating an environment that allows everyone to flourish. The EPA estimates that we spend 90% of our life in buildings, and a big part of our health outcomes has a lot to do with the environment we're surrounded by, the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the habits of people around us. And while individuals can make choices about diet and exercise, we are often simply recipients of the air quality our building owners can afford to offer us. Creating a financial tool that supports these attributes will greatly improve the chances of people benefiting from these enhanced measures. And lastly, financing resiliency measures is something most building owners probably want to do, but are unable to do so given budget constraints that are happening in the market. However, we know addressing problems before they happen tend to be cheaper than simply reacting to circumstances. We need to allocate resources to for preventative and sustainable development strategies that deliver a more resilient building. Backup generators in the event of a power outage, green stormwater infrastructure to help mitigate flooding and impact on water services, on-site solar, and much more. Any funding that can mitigate disasters ahead of time is a much more humane and responsible way to address climate change, natural disasters, and public health outcomes. Currently, there's no financial mechanism to fund better investments in buildings. Currently, there's no financial mechanism to fund better investments in health and safety and quality of living for more Philadelphians. And we think CPACE could unlock financial barriers in doing so, and we fully support passage of bill number 220293. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nowalski. If you could state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Green, members of the Finance Committee. My name is Kevin Malowski. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Philadelphia chapter of the American Institute of Architects, otherwise known as the AIA. The AIA is Philadelphia's voice of the architectural profession and represents more than 260 member architecture firms, as well as 220 affiliate companies supplying products and services to the construction industry in the region. Today, I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 220293, which expands the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, otherwise known as CPACE for short, to include single-owner multifamily buildings of 5 or more units, improvements to indoor air quality, as well as resilience improvements for buildings. CPACE is a funding mechanism that enables owners to obtain affordable, long-term financing for 100% of the cost of energy and water efficiency retrofits. The funding is backed up by a senior lien against the property, which allows the financing to stay with the building and its new improvements if it is ever sold. This allows the building owners to perform sustainable improvements and to spread these costs out over their expected payback period, which can sometimes take 5 to 15 years or more. During this time, though, the owner is receiving the benefits of these improvements, such as lower energy bills, operational costs from the installation of energy-efficient windows or better insulation, and now cleaner air. At this time, however, Pennsylvania has only adopted CPACE legislation for commercial properties. The state is considering the expansion of CPACE, as we've heard, enlarging its scope to include multifamily buildings, resiliency measures, and indoor air quality improvements. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, indoor air quality improvements are crucial now more than ever. In addition to improvements which increase fresh air and filtration, we would encourage the inclusion of indoor air quality measures which reduce sources of indoor combustion, such as replacing gas appliances with that of electric. Should that legislation be passed in Harrisburg, each jurisdiction would need to take action to adopt CPACE. Thus, the forward-looking bill introduced today by Council Members Green and Gilmore Richardson takes a step to preempt the passing of the bill in Harrisburg and prepare Philadelphia to take full advantage of the new CPACE expansion as soon as it is accessible. We commend this. Buildings are responsible, as we know, for over 40% of greenhouse gas emissions, and in Philadelphia, that number is even higher. The current CPACE legislation only stands to provide funding for sustainable design and improvements of commercial properties. This is a step in the right direction. Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods and communities. The CPACE expansion will help provide a funding mechanism to retrofit aging buildings and to improve their energy efficiency, lower resident and owner utility bills, as well as to remove sources of indoor air contamination and help buildings last well into the future, beyond their typical usable life. This will result in a cleaner city, strengthen communities with existing building fabrics that are close to transit, and promote better quality housing stock for all of our residents. In addition to providing funding to repair existing buildings, CPACE will also finance energy efficiency measures for new construction. By expanding the scope of CPACE financing now, we can create an opportunity to amplify the energy efficiency of our building stock and set the city on a path to a more sustainable future. The funding for these sustainability improvements and renovations will lead to more work being done in the city. This increases in work will help to create new jobs in the clean energy sector, as well as the construction industry in general. Right? We believe these jobs are sustained. They will remain in the city. They cannot be transferred and moved to wherever the next pipeline is going under construction. The expansion of CPACE will help to promote sustainable renovations and reduced energy use, which means cleaner air and healthier environment for all Philadelphians, as I mentioned earlier. By including multifamily projects, we believe we are amplifying the opportunities for sustainable projects while also promoting improved ventilation and air quality at a time when it is needed most. This bill serves only to benefit Philadelphia and its residents. So to that end, the Philadelphia chapter of the AIA supports Bill number 220293 and would like to thank Council members Green and Gilmore Richardson for introducing it. We encourage all council members to support and enact this legislation. Thank you very much for your time.
I want to thank the witnesses who testified on this bill. We're going to now call up the witnesses for bill number 220506. And I'll have Mr. Iannuzzi read the witnesses for that panel. I'm going to give the witnesses the opportunity to prepare for testimony. It's been a real pleasure to work with Emily Shapiro and the Energy Authority in passing the original CPACE legislation impacting commercial buildings. We're looking forward to the multifamily CPACE legislation being passed in Harrisburg. Many people don't realize and think about that one of the big aspects of climate change challenge that we have in our city and around the globe is in our buildings. And so having CPACE for commercial buildings, which we currently have, and it was a pleasure to introduce this bill so we can get ahead of the game and be ready as soon as the multifamily CPACE legislation is passed for residential buildings. Mr. Iannuzzi, if you could read the names of the witnesses for the next panel.
Natalia Dominguez Buckley, Deputy Treasurer for the City of Philadelphia, and Emily Shapiro, Executive Director for the PEA.
Okay, Ms. Dominguez Buckley, if you could state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, and then we'll go in that order of witnesses.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chair Green and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Natalia Dominguez Buckley, and I am the first Deputy City Treasurer. Here with me today are Jacqueline Dunn, City Treasurer, and Matt Bowman, Deputy City Treasurer and Sinking Fund Executive Director, as well as Emily Shapiro, Executive Director from the Philadelphia Energy Authority, PEA. We're here to testify in support of Bill number 220506. Bill number 220506 will authorize the city and the Philadelphia Energy Authority to enter into a service agreement related to the financing of an energy efficient city street lighting system. The bonds will be issued in an aggregate amount of up to $92 million outstanding plus related costs of issuance and credit enhancement, and net of original issue discount. The bonds will be secured by the city's obligation under the service agreement to budget and appropriate annually amounts necessary to pay the debt service, which will be sufficient to pay debt service on the outstanding bonds. The bonds proceeds will be used to finance the construction, equipment, and installation of an energy-efficient city street lighting system, including LED street lighting, controls, and networking design to reduce energy consumption or operating costs associated with the lighting system. City Council has previously approved Bill number 220-359, authorizing the city to enter into a guarantee energy savings contract for this project. I respectfully request that the committee report the bill with a favorable recommendation and a suspension of the rules so as to permit first reading at the next session of council. This concludes my testimony. I am happy to answer questions at this time.
Real quick, Ms. Dunn or Ms. Shapiro, will you be offering testimony, or are you just here to provide support for Ms. Dominguez-Buckley?
I'll be providing a little bit of extra testimony.
Okay. Ms. Shapiro, please state your name for the record and then proceed.
Great. Thank you so much. Emily Shapiro, President and CEO at the Philadelphia Energy Authority. My testimony will just focus on project structure and financing a bit. I think Natalia already provided most of the background here. But I'll just say thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on this bill. So referencing 220506, in collaboration with the Office of Sustainability, the Streets Department, and many others in this administration, PEA has been supporting the development of this LED street lighting project since my first week on the job in 2016. So I'm really excited to be able to ask for council's approval for the financing component to move forward on this project following the approval of the contracting ordinance, as Natalia mentioned, which happened on May 26th. As previously mentioned, this project is targeting conversion of all city-owned roadway, alleyway, and decorative or commercial corridor lighting to long-lasting, energy-efficient LED fixtures, and adding a lighting management system which will allow for various controls and immediate outage reporting, making it easier and faster for the Streets Department to identify and address maintenance issues. This project will touch every neighborhood in Philadelphia, and I'll just reiterate, we know how critically important it is to get the details right here. The citywide LED street lighting conversion and lighting management system project would be the third project the city has completed using the state's Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, or GESA. GESA sets up a procurement, contracting, and long-term evaluation process that is specific to energy projects. So it requires a 20-year payback or better and a performance guarantee from the selected vendor. The city used this tool previously on projects at the Quadplex and the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which just received a Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence. PEA led the public procurement process for the street lighting project, which began in 2020 with leadership and support from the city's Energy Office and Streets Department. The selection committee included representatives from PEA, the Office of Sustainability, Streets, OIT, OEO, Finance, the Treasurer's Office, and the Law Department. 4 vendors were selected to move forward with the RFP issued in March 2021, and Amoresco was the selected vendor. They were selected in October 2021, and contract negotiations are now complete. This Guaranteed Energy Savings project will pay for itself, using savings to pay for the debt service while updating critical city infrastructure. And it features a performance guarantee to ensure that projected energy savings are being achieved. This project is designed to be budget neutral. On behalf of the city, we are pursuing approval of up to $92 million for this project. This not to exceed figure takes into account global supply chain issues and workforce costs associated with potential delays in procuring materials. We anticipate that the project will be somewhere in the $70 to $80 million range, which will be confirmed through the investment grade audit, which will occur before bond issuance. Pending approval, PEA will issue the bond in partnership with the City Treasurer's Office before construction can begin. Construction on the project will take approximately 24 months, and we anticipate completion by spring 2025. PEA will be the issuer for the debt on this project rather than the Philadelphia Authority for Industrial Development, as is typical for many city projects. This provides value to PEA and does not change the city's cost profile. This project is a unique opportunity to improve lighting equity, reduce lighting maintenance issues throughout the city, and reduce the city's carbon footprint by 9%. And because of the size and scope of the project, this will be the largest single energy efficiency project the city has taken on. It will also be a great opportunity to support and grow local and diverse businesses and create real workforce opportunities throughout the deployment. PEA will remain engaged and accountable throughout this process, and we're very grateful, as always, to our city partners for their collaboration and commitment to this complex and impactful project. So for all these reasons, we ask for your approval of the financing for the LED street lighting conversion project via Bill 220506. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shapira. Thank you for all the other witnesses testify. Having worked on and asked about this issue quite a bit over a number of months, waiting for this bill to come here. It's also a pleasure to see how the Energy Authority has grown, having introduced legislation in this body, giving them the ability to issue debt. And now, if I remember correctly, this is their first offering in that regard. And the fact that the street lighting project will provide not only energy efficiency, but also provide equity in reference to lighting around the city of Philadelphia, especially considering some of the significant challenges we have with public safety in our city. So this, and it's also a revenue neutral project. So this provides a lot of great opportunities, as well as providing ability to work with diverse contractors as part of this initiative. So it's a real win-win in a number of respects in reference to this project. And as someone who's involved in the GISA project with the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I hope this project also gets the same accolades that project received when we did lighting projects with the Museum of Art and other sustainability initiatives to improve the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Saying that, are there any questions from members of council to any of the witnesses that are here? Councilmember Dom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. I just have a quick question. This is, it's great that we're doing this. I know my office has spoken about this, but I have a question about it's separate from the legislation, but it's related. I'm wondering how we can take advantage of this moment. Because when we install all these new LED lights, we'll enhance our technology options in our street lighting network. So the question is, there might be opportunities here for other technology, whether it's red light cameras, speed cameras with state approval, artificial intelligence cameras that maybe we can help us identify problems on our roadways with police and pedestrians having to do so. Even these sound detectors that we could utilize for some of the giving us indications of ATV and dirt bike traffic, and even from a crime prevention. We just have an opportunity here when we're doing this to install the latest and greatest technology and incorporating it. I guess my question is, what are we doing to try to make ourselves, smarter, faster, and better as we implement this new system?
I can take that question. Thanks so much, Councilmember. That's a question we've talked about an awful lot, and what we will ensure is that the communications network required to be able to add that smart city technology to polls will be enabled. So we'll be ready for any federal funding that comes our way to be able to use to add smart city technology. We'll also work with the police department and other stakeholders throughout the community engagement and stakeholder process to get a better sense of what technology is needed and how we can best tailor the fixtures to meet the needs of things like cameras or other technology. We're working closely with OIT, and as a result of the investment grade audit, we'll also have a lighting equity study. So that'll give the city a detail on a poll by poll basis of where we may need to add additional lighting or other technology as well. So it's something that's top of mind, and we're working closely with OIT and the Smart City PHL team to do as much of that as we can. The funding is likely to only be able to provide budget neutrality for new fixtures and the lighting management system with the communications network. So we'll need additional funding to be able to add other priorities.
I don't think I can speak for myself, can't speak for everybody, but if you came to us and said, we have some tremendous public safety initiatives we can do here, whether it's on the monitoring of the noise or crime prevention, I think this technology is the way of the future. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to really utilize what you're doing, which is great. But just expanding it and really helping in the public safety area. That's what everybody wants to see right now. So whatever you could do in that and incorporate it, if you came back to us for more money, I'd be supportive. Because if it's going to help our police, one of the things we lack in the police department is up-to-date technology. We barely have enough cell phones for everybody. Can you imagine that? It's like when they had horse and buggies, nobody had a buggy whip. It's ridiculous. So whatever we can do in the way of technology, we need to advance, because the people out there that are doing the crimes have a lot more technology than we do. We need to ramp it up. And I want you to put that on top of mind and see what we can do.
And we'll make sure we follow up with your office on that as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Dom. Thank you, all of the witnesses for this panel. I want to let my colleagues know we're about to go into the last panel for this bill. For this hearing. We'll start with, this will be on the PGW capital budget 220511. And we'll have representative from PGW, John Zook, to testify. And then we'll go into the other witnesses that are here to testify in that regard. I just wanted to remind any staff or members of council that we will be then going into our public meeting so that way we can vote on the various bills that are here with us today. Mr. Iannuzi, if you can please read the name of the next witness, and actually all the witnesses that will be testifying, and then we'll move forward into this final group of witnesses.
John Zook, Senior Vice President for Gas Management at PGW, followed by Russell Hicks, CEO, Business Coach, and Trainer at Ebony Sons Enterprises, Amani Reed, Climate Justice Fellow at Power Interfaith, Pamela Darville, Leanna Bond, who's here on behalf of Physicians for Social Responsibility PA, Shamar Pitts, Strategy Organizer for Philly Thrive, and Harrison Mace.
Okay, Mr. Zook, if you could.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, as well as Peter Winslow. My apologies.
Mr. Zook, if you can state your name and then proceed with your testimony.
Good day, Chairman Green and members of City Council Committee of Finance. My name is John Zook. I am Senior Vice President of Gas Management for the Philadelphia Gas Works. I'm appearing today on behalf of PGW in support of Bill 220511, which would approve a fiscal year 2023 capital budget for PGW. PGW's proposed fiscal 2023 capital budget provides resources to manage and operate the Philadelphia Gas Works and maintain facilities in good order and condition, consistent with the best and most economical processes that are usual and customary for gas utility. Therefore, PGW respectfully asks the Committee on Finance for a favorable report on Bill number 220511, and that City Council approve and authorize a fiscal year 2023 capital budget of totaling $187,353,000. PGW also respectfully requests a suspension of the rules for the initial reading of this bill. I would like to extend our appreciation to both the Gas Commission and the staff for conducting a budget review that was both efficient and comprehensive. Also, on behalf of PGW, I'd like to thank the City Council for the past support of our efforts to serve the citizens of Philadelphia and look forward to your continued support. I am available to respond to your questions concerning this matter. Thank you for your time and consideration to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Zook. I have a few questions before we go into the witnesses. On Tuesday, May 10th, I believe you testified at the Philadelphia Gas Commission meeting.
It was not me, but I was one of my staff.
Yes, and who was the representative of PGW that testified at that hearing?
It might have been, there's a bunch of them, but it might have been Dan Cassidy.
Okay. And are you familiar with the testimony that was provided by Mr. Cassidy or another representative of PGW at the Gas Commission hearing?
I'm familiar with some of the ideas and some of the questions were asked.
Okay. So in that regard, one of the questions that came up was in reference to the diversification study. And as was stated in that hearing of the Gas Commission, that PGW was committed to spending resources of $500,000 to the ideas that were in the diversification study. Is that correct from your understanding? And PGW, as they stated in that Gas Commission hearing, in a public hearing, testified to that effect. And is that your understanding? And also, on behalf of PGW, be able to testify to that matter this afternoon?
Yes, sir. We have committed to $500,000 in our 2023 operating budget, not in the capital budget. Yes, for the diversification study for
Right.
geothermal. Sorry.
And my understanding is that both the operating budget and the capital budget for PGW, although the capital budget is approved first, and we're now going through the process on the operating budget, but both of those budgets start in the new fiscal year PGW, which begins in the fall, which is September, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And as part of the conversation regarding the operating budget, it's my understanding that the Gas Commission and or PGW themselves can decide during the hearings on the operating budget to allocate more dollars than the $500,000 that has been articulated in the Gas Commission hearing, and as well as you're stating right now.
That's correct.
Right. So, and that could include $500,000 specifically for maybe geothermal or other initiatives as part of the diversification study, or there may be some other concepts that PGW is reviewing that they may decide as we're going through the operating budget to add money to the operating budget expense.
That is correct. We are starting to look into some of those other options also. Yes.
And it's also from your understanding of operations of the gas commissioners, the hearing examiners of the gas commission, that they'll review the operating budget like they did the capital budget and make recommendations on whether to remove certain items from the budget or say we should provide additional dollars in the budget, just like they've done with the capital budget, which is here this afternoon.
That is correct, Councilman. They do that every year.
Right. There was also some statements regarding advanced engineering work within the capital budget. There's been statements made that those are dollars that should be allocated for advanced engineering work. Can you give some more perspective on what is advanced engineering work?
Advanced engineering work, it's just a protocol to go out and see if we have a potential project that might work at a particular location or in our city, wherever. We can't make it as a capital because there's no capital to assign to the monies for the next 5 or 10 years. So that's why it's in the operating. Now, if we do get a project that we like, and out of the recommendation or the expenditure that we spent the $500,000 from, what can happen is we would go back to city council and or then the commission to ask for some dollars to put towards, from the capital side, put towards a project that we start as of probably maybe 24, 25.
From my understanding, and from my understanding, not only PGW operations, but city operations, that when you're doing something that's a capital expenditure, that's an area where you've already specifically know how you're going to spend those dollars. You probably have already issued an RFP to identify, or about to issue an RFP to identify contractors to do specific work. And it's my understanding, although the Philadelphia Gas Works has an understanding of wanting to spend money for geothermal and other ideas that came out of the diversification study, it's still trying to identify how those dollars are spent because an RFP has not been submitted. Still trying to figure out exactly what's the best way of doing those projects. Is that correct?
That is correct. We've already started some of that legwork internally without spending the $500,000 with our internal sources, and we're trying to figure out what the best way to do it in the RFP. So we're hoping by the end of 2023, again, we're hoping that we can get an RFP out on a specific project or yes.
And just like on the city in reference to operating dollars, we spend dollars on operating projects, and it's not from a fiscally prudent way of managing dollars to spend capital dollars on operating expenses, especially when those specific items and specific aspects of that capital project has not been identified.
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Zook, for your testimony. I'd now like to have the other witnesses that are here to testify, and then we'll have any questions from members of council. I believe Mr. Anuzzi has already provided the names. We'll go in the order of Russell Hicks, Amani Reed, Pamela Darville, Linnea Bond, Jamar Pitts, Harrison Mace, and Peter Winslow.
Thank you, Chairman Green. Thank you for that explanation and the commitment from PGW for the operating budget. Thank you today for the opportunity to testify on Bill 220511. My name is Russell A. Hicks, representing Power, Philadelphians organized to witness, empower, and rebuild. I serve as co-chair of the Climate Justice and Jobs team with Power. It's a multi-faith organization in Pennsylvania, organizing for racial and economic justice on a livable planet. Through our PGW campaign, we are organizing to do two things mainly. One, to transfer PGW into a utility, a public utility that provides heating and cooling without fossil fuels. And two, to ensure all Philadelphians have the energy they need at rates they can afford to preserve and to create new green union jobs through this green transition. As you know, the climate crisis is accelerating. The closure of schools last week during the heat wave was just a small reminder. We urgently need transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources. And as the UN Secretary General said earlier this year, delay means death. PGW's proposed capital budget includes no investments to advance that transition, but does continue to expand fossil fuel infrastructure. This is a business as usual budget in a time when business as usual is leading us into catastrophe in terms of our climate. And the sharp rise of natural gas prices in recent months, which is hurting our residents in Philadelphia. Just to remind us, the dependency on fossil fuels threaten not only our climate, but our economic well-being. As my colleague will explain, Power and 33 other organizations are forming coalitions to ask the City Council to ensure PGW plans fossil fuel thermal network pilot projects in the next fiscal year. That would be a critical step in the right direction. Further, we need to pass legislation that requires PGW to produce business plans and budgets that match Philadelphia's climate goals, which ensures affordability and protecting and creating new union jobs. The city has committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2050, but the commitment is only meaningful if it leads to action. The proposed capital budget seems to ignore city's climate goals. We need you to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Philadelphia is hurting in so many ways right now: gun violence, poverty, rising rents that was detailed on today's session, crumbling schools, gentrification also covered today. It may seem like we can't take responsibility for protecting a livable planet while dealing with all of these other emergencies, but we have to and we can. These problems are linked together, and so are the solutions. We are asking for a need to propose PGW budgets so that it reflects our city's climate goals and pass legislation to ensure that future capital budgets match those goals. Thank you.
Next witness is Amani Reed, then Pamela Darnville, Linnea Bond, Shamar Pitts, Harrison Mace, Peter Winslow. Please state your name for the record and proceed in that testimony, in that order,
Thank you, Councilmember Green. My name is Amani Reed. I am a Temple University alumna. I live in North Philadelphia. I'm representing Power Interfaith along with Russell. And I'm a climate justice fellow. I thank you for the opportunity. I will be testifying about Bill 220506. Also at Power, we value the common spiritual energy that underlies our humanity, and we lift up the inherent dignity of every person. We're also rooted in shared faith and ethics, united diverse congregations and ethical organizations, and we want to live in a world in which all of us, Black, brown, and white, are in just balance with each other. Power strongly supports Bill 220506. This bill would enable the city to replace 120,000 plus lighting fixtures, as we know, with long-lasting, high-efficiency LEDs, and link all newly and already converted LEDs to a lighting management system. This project would also dramatically improve energy efficiency and thereby reduce the emissions of toxic air pollution and climate-damaging greenhouse gases from fossil fuel power plants. It's the largest energy conservation project in our city's history. It's an encouraging step towards the much bigger transformation of our infrastructure that we need in order to protect a livable climate in the state. This project will also have many other important benefits, like enhancing visibility to improve safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. It will add remote lighting and outage monitoring that will create operational efficiencies. It will also support local and diverse businesses and workers, and workforce development agreements, which Power strongly supports. And we were glad to see that the plan for this project supports citywide lighting equity as well. Right now, children are at risk of being on a block with no street lights for months or weeks at a time. Senior citizens are also at risk, and also individuals with disabilities who are in need of those street lights. And the city has failed to replace those street lights, predominantly in lower income communities, and disproportionately impact the communities in a timely manner. This is a major injustice. The LED project also includes a commitment to prioritize communities who are dealing with these burdens and disproportionate impacts. And we thank the Office of Sustainability and Councilmember and the Streets Department for prioritizing equity, as well as engaging the public in planning the initiative. And we urge the City Council to ensure that these goals are fully achieved and met. This bill contrasts sharply with the bill to approve PGW's fiscal year 2023 capital budget, and my colleagues will ask you to amend that bill to require PGW to invest in planning thermal network pilot projects, as Russell stated, and that advances the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy that we need. The LED street lighting project also represents large-scale investment in appropriate technology with participatory planning and a real commitment to equity, which Power Interfaith is focused on. And we want to make sure the PGW's budget reflects these same goals and values. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Ms. Darnville?
Yes. Good afternoon, Chairman Green. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Pamela Darville, and I'm a member of Power's Climate Justice and Jobs team. I'm here to testify concerning Bill number 220511. Power and many organizations have been asking that PGW plan pilot projects using fossil-free thermal network technology, as other gas utilities in nearby states are beginning to do now. The potential benefits for this technology in Philadelphia is affordable heating and cooling, good union jobs, and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions that are poisoning our environment. 33 groups have asked City Council to require PGW to allocate $500,000 to fund engineering work and related work in the next fiscal year to plan such pilot projects. And we've asked Council to ensure that this planning be done in a transparent way that involves thorough public participation, and to ensure that the planning work considers how to maximize involvement of current PGW workers and their union. Council can do that by amending Ordinance number Bill 220511. We also note that in response to pressure from Power and other groups, PGW executives have now requested approval from the Gas Commissioner for $400,000 for something they are calling a geothermal feasibility study. The Gas Commission will review PGW's proposal and make a decision in August. We don't know yet what is meant by a geothermal feasibility study. It's not clear that they're aiming to plan pilot projects, and they have not made any commitments to to transparency, participation, or worker justice. Although Seth Shapiro expressed support for the idea of PGW building thermal networks when he testified to council in February, PGW executives have not earned the trust of the public. We need council to provide strong leadership and oversight to ensure that we have a rapid and just shift away from fossil fuels. City Council can and should guarantee that $500,000 are allocated to plan pilots in a timely, transparent, and participatory manner. Thank you for allowing me to present this testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Darville, for your testimony. Ms. Bond, and then Shamar Pitts, Harrison Mace, Peter Winslow.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Linnea Bond. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on Bill 220511. As the health educator representing Physicians for Social Responsibility, PA, I speak on behalf of our doctors, nurses, public health professionals, and others in the medical field who see climate change as the most pressing large-scale health crisis. The PGW proposed capital budget as presented in light of the needed specific and immediate action is unacceptable. Last year, when I was diagnosed with a brainstem and heart tumors, I wanted to take a wait-and-see approach to these slow-growing but life-threatening paragangliomas, like PGW seems to be. I was hesitant to address the problems the MRI showed clearly because I was nervous about side effects from surgery and radiation on my heart and brain. My doctors counseled that though it would be a difficult road, while I waited, the tumors would not stop growing, only more detrimentally invading my organs. We are at a moment where we must move immediately against our life-threatening climate crisis. That means transforming PGW by building geothermal grids and implementing other solutions. While we wait to address our gas reliance, the problem grows. The changes we need to secure jobs and a sustainable future are feasible. Last week, the New York State Legislature passed the Utility Thermal Energy Network and Jobs Act unanimously in the state Senate and 138-5 in the Assembly. With strong support from unions and environmental groups, the bill will enable gas and electric utilities across New York to build thermal networks that provide heating and cooling without fossil fuels. This bill will preserve and add good union jobs that will decarbonize buildings affordably and at scale. Other cities are moving forward while Philadelphia is falling behind, which is especially ironic as Philadelphia is projected to take on climate refugees from New York, Boston, and DC over the next several decades. City Council needs to require PGW to fund advanced engineering for thermal network pilot projects in fiscal year 2023 and in a transparent way that rebuilds public trust in this institution. PGW is a municipal utility, must start producing budgets and plans in line with the city's climate timeline, and that starts with this proposed capital budget. Thank you, City Council, for your work and for your attention to my testimony today.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bond. Shamar Pitts, Harrison Mace, Peter Winslow.
Can you hear me? Because I can't get my picture up.
Yes, we can hear you. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, sir. Hi, my name is Shamar Pitts from Philly Thrive. And after hearing testimony from different people today, I'm going to keep it short because for time constraints. But I believe that our crisis, our climate crisis, and the way that we combat it is not matching up. We have PGW, who definitely we accept and we are thankful for whatever the $500,000 that they're proposing to, go in the right direction to support that. But at the same time, when you want to make a $3 million commitment to further your infrastructure to natural gas, to Hillco, and you are putting money, you still put money towards fossil fuels that we have to get away from. So it's like we're going in the wrong direction. And we know we got to get away from fossil fuels. We know that. And the testimony I just heard about the LED lights and the technology that we need in our infrastructure in the city, if it's done properly and correctly, 9% of the carbon footprint will be alleviated. And to me, it's good that's 9%, but that's not a big enough number. Like, we saying by 2050, we want to be at a certain place. Who's to say we got till 2050 to get there? We can't, because we just come up with numbers and say, you know, we predict that, you know what I mean, by 2050, we should be carbon free or whatever. Who's to say we got to 2050 to get there when you keep on expanding and expanding on natural gas use, and we are in a position where we don't know if we got to that time to change our act, because right now things are being discovered that we didn't account for when we made those commitments to 2050. So now we have to make a radical change. And when you make a radical change and you try to revolutionize the way things are, you got to go outside the box. So right now, we need council to push PGW to go outside the box, not taking baby steps. We need to take leaps and bounds into this climate crisis, because the leaps and bounds that was taken to get us here, that's the same leaps and bounds we got to take to get out of it. And if we don't, we definitely have a heavy price to pay, and people will really, really, really suffer if we don't make radical changes immediately. We can't take baby steps any longer. We just can't. We can't afford it. And if PGW is forthright and caring about the community, then this is the actions that they have to take. It's going to take more than $500,000. It's going to take proactive steps, just like encourage them to spend the $3 million. That's what they're going to have to do. That's the kind of encouragement they're going to need to actually revolutionize and change and transition away from fossil fuels. So we need city council to push them in that direction and nudge them a little bit harder, because, you know what I mean, they need a little bit incentive to do it. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. Next witness, Mr. Mace.
Thanks. Can you all hear me?
State your name for the record and please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Harrison Mace. Thank you for the privilege and the platform to speak on the record about Bill number 220-511 regarding PGW's capital budget. I'm a resident in South Philly, and though I'm an advocate in a number of organizations like Philly DSA and Reclaim's Climate Justice Caucus, today I'm representing myself. This is the first time I've ever testified in a live setting before, and I'm only here because you've recognized that everyday citizens in the municipality deserve a voice in their energy future. Thank you. It's very important to me, so much so that I've changed my entire life around this type of involvement. I believe you all know why the city has announced a climate goal, and I'd like to remind you that a goal is different than a vision. A vision is something you look to, while a goal is something you act towards. We wouldn't need to act if we were on the right track, which means that PGW cannot continue with business as usual. I've watched in my lifetime as the climate issue has become the entire world my generation's inheriting, and the track we're on is taking us over a cliff. My leaders are giving the green light to keep going with every instance in which we don't take steps to change the track we're on. And yet the PGW capital budget looks like business as usual. If the world were in need of incremental change, I wouldn't be here. Neither would all the other speakers. We're all bonded in this climate inheritance together, and it sucks. Why are we postponing the opportunities for a clean future when states like New York are passing almost unanimously a first in the nation thermal energy network and jobs bill shown to advance climate solutions at scale and deliver sustainable union jobs? PGW is just a piece of the puzzle, but it's also the largest publicly owned gas utility in the greatest country on earth. It's a big piece. So who really owns PGW? Because surely if the city owns PGW, then its budget and business plan should match the city's climate goals. But that's not what I see. That's not what my neighbors are saying. Even Seth Shapiro's on the record supporting thermal networks, but we still haven't confirmed a specific network geothermal pilot for the next fiscal year, nor have we clarified the details for what that looks like. That would be a real change that everyday citizens can see and feel and take pride in. And council can amend this bill to mandate that transparency. The last point I want to make is that we need to move even on that vision. The largest municipally owned gas utility is a part of the city's climate goals, by definition for the words climate and city. And so it's either helping us achieve the climate goals we've created, or it's the reason we won't attain them. We need council to pass legislation requiring our PGW to create budgets and business plans that correspond specifically to the city's climate goals, while ensuring access and affordability and leading the country by protecting and creating good union jobs that others can only vision for the future. Philadelphia can be that future, but it starts in meetings like this. Thank you for the time and platform and attention.
Thank you for your testimony. Peter Winslow.
My name is Peter Winslow. I reside in Northwest Philadelphia. Thank you, Chairman Green, for this opportunity to join with my colleagues from Power, Philly Thrive, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and other environmental justice organizations with respect to the approval of the PGW capital budget bill number 220511. I support the expansion of CPACE and the LED illumination program, and I'm very sympathetic to the needs of the homeless and low-income folks in Philadelphia. But my mandate is to talk about PGW and its capital budget. I'm a CPA, and I understand the difference between an operating budget and a capital budget. And our concern and our maybe I should go back a bit and approach this a different way. Excuse me for that. I found the necessity to ad lib here, but the act in New York it promotes the development of thermal energy networks. It provides jobs for transitioning utility workers. It removes barriers to decarbonization. It facilitates bringing to scale the adoption of renewable energy and energy efficiency to free our society from dependence on fossil fuels. The thing that is most significant to me of the passage of this bill in New York is that it was the combined effort and desire of utility management, union labor, and the environmental community and consumers and everybody in the community that this should be the way to go. Clearly, the necessary transition from reliance on fossil fuels is happening elsewhere. Our concern is that we are not moving with expeditiously and in a collaborative way in Philadelphia, that we don't really feel the buy-in. We do from council, but we don't feel the buy-in from PGW that they really are moving in this direction. If we had more transparency, if there was more collaboration in terms of working together on identifying the problems and coming up with solutions together, we would have the warm fuzzies. But we don't right now because the $500,000 for a study of geothermal systems. We should be beyond that in the operating budget and have coherent plans in place to effectuate the transition that the city has committed to by PGW, and to be moving forcefully in that direction. That's what we think is missing. That's why we are concerned that we maintain the maximum amount of oversight of PGW, both from the Gas Commission and from City Council, because we have not seen a transparency, a willingness to engage in a collaborative process and work together toward a transition for PGW that will keep it from descending into an unsustainable position, both in terms of policy and economics, where they'll have stranded assets and there'll be instead of an orderly transition, a mess on our hands. We were advocating, the environmental community was advocating for a transition for the refinery, and instead the refinery blew itself up, and the steel workers and other workers at the refinery were thrown out of their jobs. We don't want to see that for the utility workers. We don't want to see a disruption for the consumers in Philadelphia, especially our low-income consumers. So we're looking for fundamentally for PGW to come forward and be more forthright, to put forward the plans for the transition that is needed. In the absence of that, to have persistent pressure from all the avenues that the citizens of Philadelphia have, which is the Gas Commission and the City Council, to move transition forward as rapidly as possible. So let's bring PGW into alignment with the city's energy transition goals. Thank you very much, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Winslow, for your testimony. Are there any other witnesses here to testify on any of the bills that are before us this afternoon? Once again, are there any other witnesses that are here to testify regarding any of the bills that have been heard this afternoon before the Committee on Finance? Okay. To my colleagues, I'll let you know we'll be soon going into the public meeting. Are there any questions from members of council for any of the witnesses that have recently testified? Okay, seeing and hearing none, to my colleagues who are members of this committee, we're going to prepare for the public meeting. So please be prepared to be here for the roll call. To the stenographer, do you need a break before we go into the public meeting?
No, I'm fine. Thank you, Councilman.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, there being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify, I've already asked anyone else here who's present is hearing whose name we failed to call that wishes to offer testimony on any of the bills be considered today, make that request already. Hearing none, I want to thank all the panelists and witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions, and now invite all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from the meeting before we go into our public meeting. We'll now pause the proceedings briefly as participants leave the hearing. This concludes the public hearing of the Committee on Finance. We will now go into a public meeting to consider action to be taken on the bills before this committee today. Okay, we will now convene the public meeting. Mr. Inez, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you're present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Bass.
Good afternoon. I am still present.
Councilmember Dom.
Good afternoon, present. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your endurance. I am present.
Councilmember Squilla.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm present.
And Chair Green.
And I am present. Thank you all for being here for an engaged conversation on a number of important issues before us this afternoon. Thank you for your participation, diligence, and your questions, and as well as engagement with the various witnesses that we had here this afternoon. With that, I would like to recognize Councilmember Squilla, because we are now in the public meeting of this Committee on Finance. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Squilla for a motion regarding bill number 22092.
Councilmember Green. Councilmember Green, can I have 2 minutes?
Who is that speaking?
This is Councilmember Squilla.
Oh, yes. Yes, Councilmember Squilla.
Hold on.
Okay, take your time. Take your time.
Okay.
And as we're waiting for Councilmember Squilla, I know there were a number of issues that were presented this afternoon as we prepare for the Gas Commission meetings for later this, spring and summer regarding the operating budget. We will have our hearing examiners do as they always do, ask the questions that have been brought up both today and also came out in previous Gas Commission meetings regarding how we move forward with the ideas and pilot concepts regarding the diversification study, and also specifically regarding geothermal. That's something that I've had opportunity to learn about through the work in Boston, through Boston Gas, which is part of the National Grid, where they were able to do a geothermal project along with the United Steelworkers, which was, from my perspective, a win-win-win to provide the opportunity to do geothermal infrastructure and also preserve jobs for members of the steelworkers. So we look to have those type of projects in the City of Philadelphia through PGW and need to identify locations where we can have those type of projects to begin some of the issues and concerns that were raised regarding diversification. Also, as we heard earlier, some of the concerns regarding dollars being allocated for prevention of homelessness as an important aspect of this project, and the concern that many people raised about future people, especially youth, being homeless and dollars being spent on production, which is also a very important issue. It's my understanding that with the dollars coming from the Home American Rescue Plan, we do have some flexibility to tweak how we use those dollars. I think we need to continue the conversation with Liz Hirsch, as well as Melissa Long and others from the Department of Housing and Community Development, so we do not get into silos and provide the dollars that are needed for the prevention of homelessness, as well as the additional dollars needed for who help those who are homeless and create more affordable units in our city. It's also my understanding that because of the timing of the application for the home ARPA dollars, just like the consolidated plan, we need to get that application passed in order to make the critical deadlines for the Department of Housing and Urban Development but that does not stop us from continuing to ask the questions about allocating additional resources for prevention of homelessness, especially in reference to youth in the city of Philadelphia, especially as we are trying to pivot out of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we have additional issues and resources and challenges, issues that I'm sure we'll continue to have dialogue on, not only through this committee, but also members of council, and also for those who testified today, we'll still have those opportunities to continue to engage both the Department of Housing and Community Development and Office of Homeless Services, so we can continue to prioritize the need for funding to reduce homelessness in our city and provide more units in our city as well. With that, Councilmember Squilla, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Thank you. We are now in a public meeting of the Council Committee on Finance. At this point, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Squilla for a motion on Bill number 220292.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bill number 220292 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Jones that Bill number 220292 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Now I'd like to recognize Councilmember Squilla for a motion on Bill number 220293.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bill number 220293 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Bass that Bill number 220293 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. I recognize now Councilmember Squilla for a motion on Bill number 220506.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bill number 220506 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It is moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Bass that Bill number 220506 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further moved that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Now I'd like to recognize Councilmember Squilla for a motion on Bill number 220508.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bill number 220508 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Bass that Bill number 220508 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Squilla for a motion on Bill number 220509.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bill number 220509 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Bass that Bill number 220509 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and that the rules of, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Squilla once again for a motion on bill number 220510.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bill number 220510 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Bass that bill number 220510 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Our returning champion, Councilmember Squilla, I would like to recognize you for a motion on bill number 220511.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 220511 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Bass that bill number 220511 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and to permit and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Squilla again for a motion on bill number 220529.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bill number 220529 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Squilla that bill number 220529 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. I'd like to recognize Councilmember
That's an emergency.
I would like to recognize Councilmember Squilla to make a motion to continue the hearing for another 3 hours. No, just joking. Just joking. Yes.
Second.
I think, wait. Let's make sure that motion that was not a true motion. Someone so moved. I said for the next 3 hours. I want to strike that from the record. That was just a joke to give some levity. It was at a very long hearing. So just to make the record clear, there was no motion to continue this Finance Committee meeting for another 3 hours. And I retract any statement to that effect if anyone had that belief, and there was no motion and no seconding of that motion to continue this Finance Committee hearing at any additional time than the time we've already spent this afternoon. So with that, this concludes the business before the Committee on Finance. I'd like to thank all of you for your attendance for today's hearing. Thank you so much for your participation for today's hearing and your engagement with all the witnesses and participation. And this hearing is now concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great job.
Thank you.